Red wine splattered across white silk like a gunshot wound. In the center of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, Ilara Voss stood frozen, drenched, exposed, humiliated by the one person who shared her face. Her identical twin had just destroyed her in front of a room full of strangers, and Ilara couldn't even breathe, let alone fight back. But across the dining room, a man who'd built an empire on fear and violence saw something in that broken moment that stopped him cold. What happens when the city's most dangerous predator decides to protect the prey? Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The reservation had been a mistake from the beginning. Ilara knew it the moment her friend Clara had thrust the confirmation email into her hands 3 weeks ago. Eyes bright with that particular brand of cheerful tyranny that came from people who genuinely believed they knew what was best for you. You need to put yourself out there, Clara had insisted, as if Ilara's carefully constructed solitude was some kind of prison rather than the sanctuary it actually was. Just one date. What's the worst that could happen? Now sitting at a corner table in Luminaire, a restaurant so aggressively elegant that even the shadows seemed curated, Ilara could answer that question with painful clarity. The worst was happening. The worst was being here at all. She tugged at the sleeves of her cream silk blouse, pulling the fabric down over her wrists in a gesture so habitual she barely registered doing it anymore. The restaurant hummed with the kind of cultivated sophistication that made her skin crawl. Crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables where beautiful people conducted beautiful conversations with the ease of those who'd never spent an evening at home wondering if their own company was enough. The menu sat unopened before her. She'd glanced at it once, seen the prices, and felt her stomach clench. Even the fonts were intimidating, some elegant serif that probably had a pedigree longer than her own. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it with embarrassing eagerness. Clara. How's it going? Is he there yet? Ilara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The truth, that she'd arrived 20 minutes early because the thought of walking in to find her date already waiting had sent her anxiety into a spiral, seemed too pathetic to type out. Ilara. Not yet, still waiting. Clara. Don't be nervous. You look amazing. He's gonna love you. The lie was kind, at least. Ilara had chosen her outfit with the same careful calculation she applied to everything. Nothing too bold, nothing too memorable. Cream silk blouse, gray slacks, minimal jewelry. The art of being present without being seen, a skill she'd perfected over 28 years of trying not to take up too much space in the world. She glanced toward the entrance again, dreading the moment her date would arrive. Michael something. Finance, according to his profile. A friend of Clara's boyfriend. The setup had all the hallmarks of disaster, but refusing would have meant another lecture about her self-imposed isolation. And sometimes it was easier to just surrender. The restaurant sommelier glided past her table, and Ilara immediately dropped her gaze, studying the white tablecloth as if it contained secrets. She could feel the weight of other diners' eyes, or imagined she could. The couple 3 tables over, laughing too loudly. The business dinner happening near the windows, all sharp suits and sharper ambitions. Every single person seemed to belong here in a way she fundamentally didn't. Miss, would you care for something while you wait? The server's voice was professionally gentle, but Ilara still flinched. She looked up, briefly, just long enough to be polite, and shook her head. Just water, please, thank you. Of course. The server moved away with the soundless efficiency of someone who'd learned to read discomfort and respond with discretion. Ilara checked her phone again. 7:43 p.m. Michael was now 13 minutes late. The rational part of her brain whispered that traffic in Manhattan was unpredictable, that 13 minutes was nothing. The louder, meaner part suggested he'd looked her up online, found her thoroughly unremarkable, and decided to ghost her before even meeting. She wouldn't blame him. The water arrived in a glass so pristine it looked like crystallized air. Ilara murmured her thanks without making eye contact and took a sip, trying to slow her racing heart. This was fine. She was fine. In another hour, maybe less, this would be over. She could go home, change into her comfortable clothes, make tea, and return to the quiet, predictable safety of her apartment and her art books and her, well, look what we have here. The voice cut through Ilara's thoughts like a blade through silk, familiar, sharp, and carrying just enough volume to turn heads at nearby tables. No, not here. Not now. Alara's fingers tightened around her water glass as she slowly, reluctantly raised her eyes. Vera stood beside the table, and of course she looked perfect. She always did. Same face, same bone structure, same dark hair. But where Alara wore hers in a simple, forgettable style, Vera's fell in deliberately tousled waves that probably required an hour and $200 to achieve. Her dress was red, crimson really, the color of fresh wounds, and cut to display exactly the right amount of skin. Confident. Commanding. Everything Alara had never managed to be. "Vera," Alara's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "What are you doing here?" "Having dinner, obviously." Vera's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Though I have to say I'm surprised to see you here. Luminaire isn't exactly your speed, is it? Too many people. Too much visibility." The emphasis on the last word landed like a slap. Alara felt heat creeping up her neck, that familiar shame that Vera could summon with surgical precision. Around them, she could sense the attention of other diners. Not obvious, not intrusive, but there, watching, judging. "I'm meeting someone," Alara said quietly, as if that explained anything, as if it mattered. "Are you?" Vera's eyebrows rose in exaggerated surprise. "A date? You? I didn't know they were running a charity event tonight." The laughter that followed came from Vera's companion, a man Alara hadn't even noticed, too focused on her sister to register anyone else. He was tall, expensive-looking, the kind of generically handsome that came from good genetics and better personal trainers. He laughed at Vera's cruel joke like it was the height of wit. "Please," Alara whispered, "just go." "But we're just catching up," Vera said, her voice rising just enough to ensure nearby tables could hear. "It's been what, 3 months since we last spoke? You can't blame me for being curious about your life. I mean, I know there's not much to catch up on, but still." Alara's hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against her thighs under the table, trying to steady herself, trying to find some scrap of courage or anger or anything that might help her stand up to her twin. But there was nothing. Just the same hollow feeling she always got around Vera, the sense that she was somehow less than, a rough draft of the person her sister had perfected. "Actually," Vera continued, picking up a wine glass from a passing server's tray with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been told no, "I'm curious about something. This date of yours, does he know?" "Know what?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "About me. About us." Vera gestured between them with her free hand, the movement encompassing their identical faces. "Does he know he's getting the discount version?" Something in Alara's chest cracked. Not broke. It had broken too many times before to break cleanly now, but cracked. A hairline fracture in whatever fragile composure she'd managed to construct. "Vera, please. I mean, it's only fair to warn him, right?" Vera's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement or might have been malice. With her, it was hard to tell the difference. That he's getting the sister who hides in museums all day, cataloging other people's art because she's too terrified to create anything of her own. The one who can barely order coffee without stammering. The one who, oops! It happened so fast. One moment Vera was holding the wine glass. The next, red liquid was arcing through the air in a perfect, terrible parabola. Time seemed to slow as Alara watched the wine approach, watched it hang suspended for one impossible moment, before it crashed down across her chest, her lap, her carefully chosen outfit. The sound in the restaurant died instantly. Cold. The wine was cold, not warm like blood, though the color was close enough. It soaked through silk immediately, the fabric clinging to her skin, turning translucent in places that made Alara want to disappear. She sat frozen, not breathing, not moving, as red wine dripped from her hair onto her shoulders and continued its relentless spread across her clothing. "Oh my God," Vera said, her voice pitched perfectly to Carrie. "I'm so sorry. You moved so suddenly, I couldn't help it." Lies. All lies. Alara had seen the deliberate tilt of Vera's wrist, the calculated aim, but she couldn't speak, couldn't defend herself. Her throat had closed entirely, locked tight with humiliation and shock. The restaurant was silent now except for the quiet drip of wine hitting the floor. Every eye in the room was on her. This pathetic woman in her ruined clothes sitting alone at a table clearly set for two, drenched in wine that looked disturbingly like she'd been stabbed. "Here, let me help." Vera reached toward her with a napkin, still performing concern for their audience. "Don't." The word came out strangled, barely human. Alara pushed back from the table, chair scraping loudly against the floor. She needed to leave, needed to run. But her legs wouldn't cooperate, wouldn't move, and she was trapped in this moment with all these people staring and her sister's false sympathy and the wine still dripping, and that's enough. The voice came from somewhere to Alara's left, male, quiet, but carrying an authority that made even the ambient noise of the restaurant seem to pause. Through the blur of her humiliation, she turned her head. A man stood there, tall, maybe 6'2", dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Dark hair, dark eyes, a face that seemed carved from something harder than flesh. He wasn't looking at Vera, wasn't looking at the gathering crowd. He was looking at Alara, and there was something in his gaze she couldn't quite identify. Not pity, something else. "Here." He shrugged out of his jacket with economical movements and draped it around Alara's shoulders before she could process what was happening. The fabric was warm from his body heat, and it covered the worst of the wine damage, hiding her from the stares that felt like physical touches. Alara tried to speak, but nothing came out except a small, broken sound. The man didn't seem to expect words. He shifted his position slightly, placing himself between Alara and the rest of the restaurant, blocking the view of curious diners with his body. It was such a simple gesture, but it created an instant pocket of privacy, a shelter in the middle of catastrophe. "Sir, I don't think," Vera started, her performative concern cracking slightly. "I wasn't talking to you." The man's voice remained quiet, but something in it made Vera take a step back. He glanced at her then, a brief flick of his eyes that seemed to catalog and dismiss her in the same moment. "Your table is over there, I believe. You should return to it." "Who the hell do you think?" "Now." One word. That's all it took. Vera's companion was already backing away, suddenly fascinated by something across the room. Vera herself hesitated, her face cycling through surprise, indignation, and then something that looked almost like fear before settling on cold fury. "This is a private matter," she said. "Then you should have kept it private." The man's attention had already returned to Alara, dismissing Vera as thoroughly as if she'd ceased to exist. "Can you stand?" Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. With the jacket around her shoulders, she felt fractionally more human, though the wine was still cold against her skin and her hands were still shaking and she could still feel the weight of all those eyes. "My car is outside," the man continued. "I can have my driver take you home, or anywhere else you'd prefer." I don't know you." The words came out in a whisper, but at least they came. "No," he agreed. "You don't. But I know what it looks like when someone's being deliberately hurt, and I don't tolerate it in my presence." There was something in the way he said it, not gallant, not performative, just factual. A statement of personal policy delivered with the same weight other people might use to discuss the weather. Behind him, Alara could see the restaurant manager approaching, his expression tight with concern and probably irritation at the scene disturbing his carefully maintained ambiance. She needed to leave before this got worse, before there were more questions and more attention and more people looking at her like she was something pathetic. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay." The man nodded once and turned slightly, addressing someone Alara couldn't see. "Marcus, the car." A figure materialized from somewhere near the entrance. Another man, broader, with the kind of build that suggested violence was always an option even if it wasn't currently employed. He nodded and disappeared. "Can you walk?" the stranger asked Alara. She tested her legs. They trembled but held. "Yes." "Then let's get you out of here." He didn't touch her, didn't take her arm or try to guide her physically. Instead, he simply moved, and his presence created a kind of corridor through the restaurant. Diners who'd been staring suddenly found their meals fascinating. The manager who'd been approaching veered off toward another table. Even Vera, still standing near Alara's abandoned table, seemed to shrink back as they passed. The October air hit Alara like a blessing when they stepped outside. Cool, clean, free of the restaurant's cloying perfume and the weight of judgment. She pulled the stranger's jacket tighter around herself, shivering. A black car waited at the curb. Not a limo, but something sleek and expensive. The broad man from inside held the door open. "Where are you headed?" the stranger asked. Ilara gave her address in the East Village, her voice still shaky. The man, Marcus, nodded and closed the door once she was settled in the back seat. The stranger who'd rescued her remained on the sidewalk, watching through the tinted window. Ilara found herself looking back at him, trying to understand what had just happened. He'd asked for nothing, expected nothing, just intervened. "Your jacket," she said suddenly, rolling down the window. "I'll need to return it." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "Keep it for now. I know where to find you if I need it back." That should have been ominous, probably was ominous, but Ilara was too wrung out to care. She nodded, and the car pulled away from the curb, leaving Luminaire and its horrors behind. It wasn't until she was halfway home, watching the city slide past in a blur of lights and strangers, that Ilara realized she was crying. Silent tears that streaked her cheeks and dripped onto the expensive jacket wrapped around her shoulders. Tears for the humiliation, yes, but also for something else, for the casual cruelty of her twin, for her own inability to fight back, for the fact that a complete stranger had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than Vera had in a lifetime. And underneath it all, a question that would haunt her through the sleepless night ahead. Who was he? The apartment was dark when she arrived. Ilara's roommate Sarah was away for the week visiting family in Boston. A blessing, since it meant no questions about the wine-soaked clothes or the expensive jacket or the tears that wouldn't quite stop. Ilara dropped her keys in the bowl by the door and stood in the entryway for a long moment, trying to decide what to do first. Shower, probably. Get the wine out of her hair. Salvage what she could of the silk blouse, though it was probably ruined beyond repair. Instead, she sank down onto the floor right there in the hallway, her back against the wall, and let herself fall apart properly. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and desperate. The kind she usually suppressed, because what was the point? Crying didn't change anything. It didn't make Vera less cruel or Ilara less weak or the world less overwhelming. But tonight, alone in her dark apartment wrapped in a stranger's jacket, she cried anyway. Her phone buzzed. Clara, probably, wanting to know how the date went. Ilara ignored it. She'd deal with that tomorrow, with the explanations and the sympathy and the inevitable suggestion that she should stand up for herself more, as if she hadn't tried 1,000 times and failed every single one. When the crying finally subsided into hiccups and exhaustion, Ilara pulled herself off the floor and made her way to the bathroom. The mirror confirmed what she already knew. She looked like disaster. Red-rimmed eyes, wine-stained hair, skin blotchy from tears. The silk blouse was definitely ruined, the wine having set into the fabric like a scar. She peeled off the destroyed clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the physical evidence of the evening. The emotional evidence would take longer. Would take always, probably. Afterward, dressed in soft pajamas with her hair wrapped in a towel, Ilara finally looked at her phone. 17 missed messages. Most from Clara, increasingly frantic. 3 from a number she didn't recognize. Michael, she assumed, the date who'd never showed up. Probably for the best. She couldn't imagine trying to make conversation after what had happened. She responded to Clara with a simple text. Didn't work out. I'm fine. Talk tomorrow. Then she opened her laptop and did what she always did when the world became too much. She lost herself in art. The Metropolitan Museum's digital collection spread across her screen, thousands of images cataloged and categorized and safe. Ilara had been working as an assistant curator there for 3 years now, a job that let her spend her days surrounded by beauty, created by people brave enough to make something permanent. She'd never been brave enough herself, had never put brush to canvas or pen to paper with the intention of creating art. But she could appreciate it, she could protect it, and on nights like this, she could hide in it. She pulled up the files she'd been working on before the date, a small 17th century oil painting that had recently been donated to the museum. A domestic scene, a woman alone in a room with late afternoon light falling through a window. Nothing dramatic, nothing momentous, just a quiet moment of solitude captured forever. Ilara had spent weeks researching the painting's provenance, tracking its journey through private collections and auction houses. It was the kind of meticulous, solitary work she excelled at, No performance required, no pretending to be someone she wasn't. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, adding notes to the catalog entry, cross-referencing similar works from the same period. The world narrowed to the glow of the screen and the soft click of keys, and the familiar, comfortable territory of facts and dates and attribution. She worked until her eyes burned and the numbers on her bedside clock read 2:47 a.m. Only then did she close the laptop and crawl into bed, the stranger's jacket still draped over her desk chair where she'd carefully hung it. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by half-dreams where wine spilled in endless loops and crowds of strangers laughed while Alara stood frozen and unable to speak. In one dream, the dark-eyed man from the restaurant appeared, but instead of offering his jacket, he simply looked at her with an expression she couldn't read and walked away. She woke at dawn feeling like she'd been through a war. The weekend passed in a haze of avoidance. Clara called 6 times. Alara answered none of them, sending increasingly brief texts that promised she was fine, just tired, just needed some space. By Sunday evening, Clara seemed to accept defeat and stopped calling. Vera didn't reach out at all, which was somehow worse than if she had. The silence felt intentional, calculated, a reminder that the humiliation at Luminaire had been just another Tuesday for her sister, not worth following up on, already forgotten. Monday arrived with reluctant autumn sunshine and the obligation to return to the real world. Alara dressed with extra care, as if the right combination of neutral colors and unremarkable accessories could serve as armor against whatever the week might bring. The museum was quiet when she arrived, still 30 minutes before it opened to the public. She loved this time, the galleries empty and echoing, the art patient and permanent in the early light. She could breathe here in a way she couldn't anywhere else. "Alara, there you are." She turned to find Daniel, the senior curator, bearing down on her with his usual caffeinated intensity. He was 50-something, rail-thin, and possessed the kind of manic energy that came from spending too much time around objects that had outlived entire civilizations. "Morning, Daniel." "Morning? Yes, good. Listen, we've got a situation with the Baroque acquisition. The provenance documentation is raising some questions. Nothing serious, but the director wants eyes on it before the board meeting Thursday. Can you prioritize it?" Of course. Relief flooded through her. Work. Problems she could solve, questions with actual answers. "Excellent. Also, someone came by looking for you on Friday afternoon. Man, didn't leave a name, said he'd come back." Alara's stomach dropped. "Did he say what he wanted?" "No, and I didn't ask. You know me. Allergic to small talk." Daniel was already walking away, his mind clearly on the 17 other crises competing for his attention. Probably a donor. You know how they like to feel personally connected to the staff. But Alara did know the museum's major donors, at least by sight. And something in her gut said this visitor had nothing to do with charitable giving. She spent the morning buried in provenance documentation, tracking an oil painting's journey from a Roman palazzo through 2 world wars and 3 continents. The work was exacting and demanded complete attention, exactly what she needed to keep her mind off the disaster at Luminaire. Lunch came and went. She ate a granola bar at her desk, too absorbed in a 1940s auction catalog to bother with the cafeteria. The afternoon bled into evening. The museum closed at 5:30, and Alara finally surfaced from her research at 6, blinking in the fluorescent light of her office like something emerging from hibernation. Her phone showed 2 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemail. She gathered her things slowly, suddenly reluctant to leave the museum's safety for the unpredictable world outside. But the security guard was making his rounds, and she couldn't stay forever, much as she might want to. The October evening had turned cold, proper autumn settling in now. Alara pulled her coat tighter and headed for the subway, her mind already half-focused on the evening ahead. Dinner? Probably just toast. Maybe some work on the catalog entry she'd been drafting, definitely an early night. She made it 3 blocks before she realized someone was following her. It wasn't anything obvious. No footsteps speeding up, no one calling her name. Just a prickling awareness at the back of her neck, the sense of being watched that she'd learned to trust over years of trying to make herself invisible. Alara stopped at a crosswalk, risking a glance behind her. A figure stood half a block back, partially obscured by evening shadows and other pedestrians. Too far away to identify, but definitely there. Definitely watching. Her heart kicked into overdrive. She turned back around, forcing herself to breathe normally. It was nothing. Paranoia. New York was full of people walking in the same direction on any given street. It didn't mean the walk signal lit up. Alara crossed with the crowd, then made an impulsive turn down a side street she didn't normally take. If it was nothing, the person would continue straight. If it was something, she counted to 10, then glanced back. The figure had turned too. Panic now, bright and chemical. Alara walked faster, her practical flats clicking against the pavement. The side street was quieter than the main avenue. Fewer people, more shadows. Bad choice. She should have stayed where there were crowds. Alara Voss? The voice came from directly ahead of her this time, and she nearly screamed. A man stepped out from a doorway. Not the one who'd been following her, someone new. Tall, suited, the kind of professional anonymity that screamed corporate security or law enforcement. Yes? Her voice came out strangled. I need you to come with me, please. I don't know you. Mr. Cade sent me. The man's expression remained neutral, professionally blank. He'd like to speak with you. Cade. The name meant nothing to her, but the man said it like it should, like it was explanation enough. I don't know any Mr. Cade, Alara managed, already backing away. I think you have the wrong person. The jacket, the man said patiently, from Luminaire on Friday night. Mr. Cade would like to retrieve it and speak with you if you're amenable. The stranger. The dark-eyed man who'd given her his jacket and asked for nothing in return. Except now, apparently he was asking, or not asking, having her followed, having her cornered on a dark street by men who spoke in the careful, neutral tones of professional intimidation. I can bring the jacket to him, Alara said, still backing away. Just tell me where... Miss Voss. The man took a step forward, and Alara flinched. He stopped immediately, raising his hand slightly in a gesture of peace. I apologize. I'm not explaining this well. Mr. Cade genuinely just wants to speak with you. At your convenience, no pressure, but he asked me to extend the invitation in person, and I'm not great at this kind of thing. Was that a hint of actual discomfort in the man's voice? Alara studied him more carefully. He did look uncomfortable, actually, like someone who was much better at other tasks being forced into diplomatic service. He could have called, she said carefully. He doesn't have your number, and he thought showing up at the museum might make you uncomfortable. So, having me followed is better? I wasn't, the man sighed. Point taken. Look, I have a card. It has an address. Mr. Cade would appreciate it if you'd visit at your earliest convenience. That's all. No obligation. He extended a small card, black with silver embossing. Alara took it without getting too close, holding it like it might bite. Adrian Cade, the Meridian Penthouse. An address in Tribeca. No phone number, no email, no job title, just a name and a location printed in elegant sans serif font. What does he want? Alara asked. To talk to you, the man repeated. That's all he told me. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The man was already stepping back, melting into the evening shadows. The invitation stands. No expiration. Your choice. Then he was gone, and Alara was alone on the side street with a business card and a hammering heart and absolutely no idea what to do next. She made it home in a daze, double-checking every few blocks to make sure no one was following her this time. The apartment was still empty. Sarah's family visit had extended through the week, and Alara had never been so grateful for solitude. The jacket still hung on her desk chair. She'd meant to have it cleaned, to return it somehow, but the weekend's paralysis had prevented any action. Now she stared at it like it was evidence of a crime she didn't understand. Who was Adrian Cade? And what did he want with her? She pulled out her laptop and typed his name into the search bar. The results were sparse. A few mentions in business journals, always vague. Real estate developer, private equity investor, Manhattan businessman. But nothing concrete, no social media presence, no photos except one grainy image from a charity gala 3 years ago, too blurry to make out features. The absence of information was information itself. In an age where everyone's life was documented and cataloged and available for consumption, this kind of digital silence required effort, required intention. Alara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Miss Voss. A male voice, not the one from earlier. Older, rougher. This is Marcus. We met on Friday night. The driver. The broad man who'd opened the car door. Oh, hello. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Cade. He wanted me to apologize if his associate made you uncomfortable this evening. That wasn't the intention. What was the intention? Alara asked, surprising herself with the directness. A pause. He wants to talk to you, that's all. No games, no pressure, just a conversation. About what? That's between you and him, miss. But I've known Mr. Cade for 15 years, and I've never seen him take an interest in someone the way he did after Friday night. He's not looking to hurt you. Quite the opposite, I think. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they settled in Alara's chest like stones. Someone taking an interest in her was never good news. It meant visibility. It meant expectations. It meant the possibility of disappointing yet another person who'd momentarily thought she might be worth knowing. I don't know, she whispered. That's fair, Marcus said. But think about it. And Miss Voss? The offer of protection stands, whether you visit or not. Protection from what? From anyone who tries to humiliate you in public again. Mr. Cade was very clear on that point. The line went dead before Alara could respond. She sat in her dark apartment, turning the black business card over and over in her hands, trying to decide if Adrian Cade was her salvation or another disaster waiting to unfold. Outside, the city hummed its eternal song, car horns and distant sirens, and the compressed life of 8 million people trying to carve out space for themselves in the world. And somewhere in that chaos, a man she didn't know was thinking about her, for reasons she couldn't fathom. Alara set the card on her desk, next to the jacket, and tried to convince herself she wouldn't use either one. She was still trying when she finally fell asleep near midnight, and she was still trying when she woke the next morning. But the card went into her wallet anyway, just in case. Just in case. The card stayed in Alara's wallet for 3 days, a small rectangle of weight she could feel through the leather every time she reached for her Metro card or her ID. She didn't look at it, didn't need to. The address had burned itself into her memory within seconds of reading it the first time. Wednesday morning brought rain, the kind of persistent drizzle that turned Manhattan into a study in gray. Alara stood at her office window, watching water streak down the glass, and tried to focus on the authentication report she was supposed to be reviewing. The words kept blurring together, her mind drifting back to Friday night, to dark eyes and quiet authority, and the question that wouldn't stop circling, what did Adrian Cade want? Her phone buzzed. Clara, again. The 7th call since Monday. Alara sent it to voicemail and immediately felt guilty. Clara meant well. She always meant well. But Alara couldn't face the inevitable questions, couldn't explain what had happened at Luminaire without reliving every excruciating second. You look like death. Alara turned to find her colleague James leaning against her doorframe, coffee in hand. He was 35, perpetually rumpled, and possessed the kind of blunt honesty that would have mortified Alara if she tried it herself. Thanks, she said dryly. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? He stepped into her office without invitation, settling into the chair across from her desk. And don't tell me last night because those circles under your eyes say otherwise. I'm fine. Right. And I'm the Queen of England. James took a long sip of his coffee, studying her over the rim. Want to talk about it? Not really. Fair enough. He didn't leave, though. Just sat there in comfortable silence, which was one of the things Alara actually liked about him. James didn't need to fill every quiet moment with noise. You know, Daniel's worried about you, asked me to check in. Daniel's worried about the Baroque acquisition, Alara corrected. Not me. He can worry about both. Revolutionary concept, I know. James set his coffee down and leaned forward slightly. Look, I know we're not exactly best friends or whatever, but if something's going on, something bad, you can tell someone. You don't have to carry it alone. The kindness was worse than indifference would have been. Alara felt her throat tighten and looked away quickly, blinking hard. I'm handling it. Okay. James stood, retrieving his coffee. But the offer stands, and for what it's worth, whoever made you look like this? They're an asshole. He left before Alara could respond, which was probably for the best, since she had no idea what to say anyway. The afternoon crawled by. Alara forced herself through the authentication report, then moved on to cataloging a new shipment of prints from an estate sale in Connecticut. Busy work, mostly, but it kept her hands occupied and her mind from spiraling too far into dangerous territory. At 4:30, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but some masochistic impulse made her swipe to accept. Hello? Alara. One word, but she knew the voice immediately. Vera. Of course it was Vera. What do you want? Alara's hand tightened around the phone. That's a nice greeting for your sister. Vera's voice carried that particular lilt it got when she was enjoying herself. I wanted to check on you, make sure you were okay after that unfortunate incident Friday night. Unfortunate incident. As if it had been an accident, as if Vera hadn't orchestrated every humiliating second. I'm fine, Alara said flatly. Are you? Because I heard something interesting about a man who stepped in. Very protective, apparently. A pause, deliberate and calculated. Who was he, Alara? None of your business. Oh, but it is my business. See, we share a face, you and I. And if some powerful man is taking an interest in you, well, that affects me too, doesn't it? Ice spread through Alara's chest. Stay away from him. From who? You haven't even told me his name. Vera laughed, bright and cruel. But you will. Or I'll find out myself. You know I always do. The line went dead. Alara sat frozen, staring at her phone. Vera knew about Adrian. Somehow she knew, which meant she'd been asking around, digging, using that razor-sharp focus she employed when she wanted something. The authentication report swam before Alara's eyes. She couldn't focus, couldn't think past the cold certainty settling in her bones. Vera wouldn't let this go. She never let anything go, especially not when it involved Alara having something, or someone, that Vera didn't. Before she could talk herself out of it, Alara pulled the black card from her wallet and typed the Meridian's address into her phone. 20 minutes by subway, 15 if she walked fast enough. She was out the door before her rational mind could catch up. The rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and reflective. Alara walked quickly, her heart pounding a rhythm that matched her footsteps. This was stupid, reckless. She should go home, lock her door, pretend none of this was happening. But Vera's voice kept echoing in her head, promising interference, promising disaster. And underneath the fear was something else, something she barely recognized, anger. Not the hot, explosive kind she'd never been able to access, but a cold, determined fury at the idea of Vera poisoning this too, whatever this was. The Meridian rose 30 stories into the darkening sky, all glass and steel and money. The lobby was aggressively luxurious, marble floors, modern art that probably cost more than Alara made in a year. A front desk staffed by people who looked like they'd been cast for a film about elegant gatekeepers. Alara approached the desk, her resolve already wavering. I'm here to see Adrian Cade. The woman behind the desk didn't blink. Your name? Alara Voss. Something flickered across the woman's face. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. She picked up a phone, pressed a button, murmured something too quiet to hear. Then she hung up and smiled professionally. Mr. Cade is expecting you. Penthouse elevator is on your right. You'll need this. She handed Alara a sleek black keycard. The elevator was empty, silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Alara watched the floor numbers climb, her stomach dropping with each ascending digit. What was she doing? She didn't know this man. Didn't know anything about him except that he'd been kind once, and his absence from the internet suggested things she probably didn't want to examine too closely. The doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment. Not a hallway, not a landing. The elevator simply released her into a space so vast and open that Alara's first instinct was to step back inside and press the lobby button. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Manhattan, the city spread below like a carpet of light. The furniture was minimal, expensive, chosen by someone who understood that true luxury was restraint. Miss Voss? Adrian Cade stood near the windows, backlit by the city. In the restaurant, she'd registered him as tall and dark-eyed and compelling. Here, in his own space, he was something else entirely. Dangerous, maybe, or just powerful in a way that made the air feel different. Mr. Cade, her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Adrian, please. He moved away from the windows, and the movement was controlled, economical, nothing wasted. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either. That's a hint of something, amusement, maybe, crossed his face. Honest. I appreciate that. He gestured toward a seating area. Can I offer you something? Water? Coffee? Water would be good. Alara perched on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, trying not to look as terrified as she felt. Adrian poured water from a crystal pitcher, handed her the glass, then settled into the chair across from her. Not too close, leaving space, like he understood that proximity was a threat in itself. I should return your jacket, Alara said, latching onto the concrete thing she could control. I had it cleaned. It's at my apartment. Keep it. Adrian's eyes hadn't left her face. It looks better on you anyway. The comment should have been smooth, practiced. Instead, it landed like simple observation, stated fact rather than flirtation. Why did you help me? The question escaped before Alara could stop it. At the restaurant. Adrian was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice was measured. Because I know what cruelty looks like. And I don't tolerate it. You don't know me. No, he agreed. But I know enough. What does that mean? It means I've spent my life around predators, Miss Voss. I recognize the hunting patterns. What your sister did to you, that was calculated, designed to cause maximum damage with minimum consequence to herself. The kind of tactical cruelty that comes from practice. The accuracy of it stole Alara's breath. She took a sip of water to cover her reaction, but Adrian saw anyway. Of course he did. You've looked into me, she said. Yes. That's invasive? Probably, but I make it a point to understand situations before I involve myself in them. He leaned back slightly. You're an assistant curator at the Met. You've worked there for 3 years. Before that, you got your master's at NYU in art history. You live in the East Village with a roommate named Sarah Chen. You don't have social media. You keep to yourself. And you have an identical twin sister who seems to take pleasure in making your life hell. Each fact landed like a small violation. Alara set her water glass down carefully, trying to process the strange mix of anger and something else she didn't want to name. You had me investigated. I had you researched. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Fair point. Adrian didn't apologize, though, didn't try to justify or explain away what he'd done, just acknowledged her discomfort and moved on. Your sister called you today. What did she want? The shift in topic threw her. How do you know that? Because she called me too, or tried to. Left a message with my assistant claiming to be you and wanting to arrange a meeting. Oh no, 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 no. Alara felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. What did you call her back? No, because the voice on the message was wrong. Too confident. Too smooth. Adrian's expression darkened slightly. Your sister is planning something. I thought you should know. She always is. The words came out bitter, tired. That's just Vera. She sees something she wants and she takes it. Doesn't matter who gets hurt. What does she want from me? Not you. What you represent. Alara looked down at her hands twisted together in her lap. Power. Access. Whatever she thinks being associated with you might give her. Vera's always been like that. Always needed to be the center of attention. The one everyone wanted. And you? The question was soft but direct. Alara forced herself to meet Adrian's eyes. I just want to be left alone. To do my work and come home and not have to perform for anyone. Is that pathetic? It's honest. Adrian stood, moved to the windows. The city lights painted shadows across his face. I'm going to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Alara's hands tightened. Okay. Your sister won't stop. People like her, they don't know how. They see boundaries as challenges, refusal as temporary obstacles. She'll keep pushing until she gets what she wants, or until someone makes her stop. I can't make her stop. I've tried. For 28 years I've tried. I know. Adrian turned to face her. But I can. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Alara stood, suddenly needing distance from this man and his dangerous promises. Why? She asked. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. What do you want from this? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, like he was choosing each word with precision. I want you to not flinch when someone approaches you. I want you to be able to sit in a restaurant without looking like you're waiting for an attack. I want you to stop making yourself small. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. He moved closer, and Alara forced herself not to step back. But if you need something more concrete, I'm interested. In you. In who you are when you're not being systematically diminished by someone who should protect you. You don't know who I am. Then let me find out. It was too much, too fast, too everything. Alara shook her head, backing toward the elevator. I should go. This was a mistake. Alara, thank you for helping me Friday night, but I don't. She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the tangle of fear and want and self-preservation that was choking her. Adrian didn't try to stop her, just watched as she jabbed the elevator button, as the doors slid open, as she stepped inside. But before they could close, he spoke again. When she comes for you, and she will, call me. Please. The door shut on his words, and Alara was alone in the descending elevator, her heart racing and her hands shaking and her mind spinning with questions she didn't have answers for. She made it halfway home before the tears started. The next 2 days passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Alara threw herself into work with manic focus, staying late at the museum, volunteering for projects no one else wanted, anything to keep her mind occupied, to avoid thinking about Adrian's offer or Vera's threat or the way she'd run like a coward from the first person in years who'd looked at her and seen something worth protecting. Friday evening found her alone in the conservation lab, examining a small Renaissance oil painting under magnification. The rest of the staff had left hours ago. She had the building to herself, just her and centuries of captured beauty and the comfortable silence of work. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Sighing, Alara pulled off her magnification glasses and checked the screen. 7 missed calls from Sarah, her roommate. That was unusual. Sarah respected Alara's work hours, never called unless it was important. Alara dialed back, and Sarah picked up before the first ring finished. Oh, thank God, Alara, where are you? At work. What's wrong? Someone's been here. At the apartment. Looking for you. Ice flooded Alara's veins. What? Who? I don't know. A woman. She said she was your sister, but something felt off. She was pushy, demanding, wanted to know where you were when you'd be back. I told her I didn't know, and she got aggressive. What did she look like? Like you, obviously. Same face, same height, but different. Harder somehow. She had this way of looking at you, like she was calculating things. Vera. Of course it was Vera. Did you let her in? Alara was already packing up her things, her hands moving on autopilot. No, I told her to leave, but Alara, she said she'd be back, and she knew things about your schedule, about the museum. How does she know that stuff? Because Vera made it her business to know. Because Vera collected information like weapons and deployed them with surgical precision. Lock the door, Alara said, heading for the exit. Don't let anyone in. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Should I call the police? No, just stay inside. I'm coming. She hung up and ran. The subway was crowded, Friday night revelers heading out for the evening. Alara wedged herself into a corner, trying to breathe normally, trying to think. Vera at her apartment. Vera interrogating Sarah. Vera escalating. Adrian's words echoed in her memory. She won't stop. The apartment building looked normal when Alara arrived. No police, no disturbance, just the familiar brownstone with its tired brick and crooked steps. She took them 2 at a time, her keys already in her hand. Sarah opened the door before Alara could knock, relief washing over her face. Oh, thank God. I'm sorry, Alara said immediately. I should have warned you about her. Your sister? Sarah locked the door behind them, 3 separate locks clicking into place. Yeah, you maybe could have mentioned you had an evil twin situation going on. It's complicated. Isn't it always? Sarah collapsed onto the couch, running her hands through her short hair. She left about an hour ago, but Alara, I got a weird vibe, like she was scoping the place out. She kept looking around, asking questions about your room, your things. Alara's room. She headed there immediately, Sarah following. Everything looked normal at first glance, bed made, desk organized, books alphabetized on the shelf. But something felt wrong. She couldn't identify what, just a sense of displacement, of things being fractionally different than she'd left them. Then she saw it. Her laptop, closed on her desk. She always left it open. Always. It was a small thing, probably meaningless, but it sent alarm bells ringing through her chest. She was in here, Alara said quietly. What? How do you know? My laptop. I didn't close it. Alara opened it, her fingers trembling slightly. The login screen appeared, password protected. But Vera was smart. Vera would have found a way. Should we check if anything's missing? Sarah asked. Alara did a quick inventory, nothing obvious gone. But her work notes were still up on the screen, the file she'd been reviewing yesterday about the museum's upcoming exhibition schedule. Harmless information mostly. Except for the donor list at the bottom, names and contact information for the people funding the next show. Damn it, Alara whispered. What? She was looking for information about my work, about who I know. About Adrian, Alara didn't say. About any connection Vera could exploit. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. Against her better judgment, Alara answered. Hello? You've been avoiding me, little sister. Vera's voice sweet as poison. Alara's hand tightened on the phone. Stay away from my apartment. Your apartment? I was just visiting, catching up with your roommate. She's lovely, by the way. Very protective of you. What do you want, Vera? The same thing I've always wanted. What's mine? A pause calculated for maximum impact. Tell me about Adrian Cade. There it was, the real reason for everything. Alara closed her eyes, fighting the urge to hang up, to run, to disappear. There's nothing to tell. Liar. I know he helped you at Luminaire. I know you went to see him. I know he has money and power and connections that could be very useful to the right person. Vera's voice sharpened. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to introduce us, properly. And you're going to step aside while I remind him that he doesn't need the damaged copy when he can have the original. He's not interested in you. He will be. Once I show him what you can't. The confidence in Vera's voice was absolute, unshakable. You've never been able to keep anything, Alara. Not friends, not opportunities, certainly not men. What makes you think this will be different? Because Adrian saw through you already, Alara wanted to say. Because he recognized the hunting pattern. Because for once in her life, someone had chosen her over the performance Vera could provide. But saying any of that would only make things worse. Leave him alone, Alara said instead, her voice barely above a whisper. Or what? You'll stop me. Vera laughed. We both know you won't. You never do. You just fold like you always have, like you always will. It's pathetic, really. The line went dead. Alara stood in her violated room, holding her phone, and felt something inside her finally break. Not the way it had broken before, not fracturing into smaller, more fragile pieces. This was different. This was the breaking that came before transformation, the shattering that made space for something new. Sarah was watching her with concern. You okay? No. Alara pulled the black business card from her wallet, stared at the embossed letters. But I'm done running. She dialed before she could change her mind. Adrian answered on the second ring. Alara. She was at my apartment, going through my things, and she just called, demanding I introduce you. The words tumbled out fast, pressured. You were right. She won't stop. Where are you now? Home. My roommate's here. Stay there. I'm sending a car. Pack a bag. What? No, Alara. His voice was gentle but firm. She knows where you live. She's escalating. You're not safe there. I can't just leave. I have work tomorrow, and none of that matters if she hurts you. Please, let me help. The please did it. That small word offered without expectation, without manipulation, just a request. Okay, Alara heard herself say. Okay. 20 minutes later, she was in the back of a black car with a hastily packed duffel bag and Sarah's worried face receding in the rearview mirror. The driver, Marcus, the same one from Luminaire, said nothing, just navigated through traffic with professional efficiency. They didn't go to the Meridian. Instead, Marcus pulled up to a different building in Chelsea, smaller, less ostentatious. He handed Alara a key. Mr. Cade owns the top floor. You'll be safe here. He'll be by later once he's handled some business. What kind of business? Marcus's expression darkened slightly. The kind that ensures your sister understands boundaries. Then he was gone, and Alara was alone in an unfamiliar apartment with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable furniture and windows that looked out over the city like a promise or a threat, depending on how you chose to see it. She dropped her bag by the door and sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. This was insane. She was in a stranger's apartment, hiding from her own sister, trusting a man she barely knew because he'd been kind once, and because she was desperate, and because something in his eyes suggested he understood the particular kind of damage Vera inflicted. Her phone buzzed. Clara, finally. Alara answered, too tired to avoid it anymore. Where have you been? Clara demanded. I've been calling for days. I'm sorry. Things got complicated. Because of the date? Michael said he got stuck in traffic, and when he finally showed up, you were already gone. What happened? Alara closed her eyes. The date. She'd completely forgotten about the date, about Michael who'd never arrived, about the entire reason she'd been at Luminaire in the first place. It felt like years ago instead of less than a week. Vera happened, she said quietly. Clara's sharp intake of breath carried across the line. What did she do? Alara told her. Not everything. Not Adrian, not the part about hiding in a strange apartment, but enough. The wine, the humiliation, the escalation. That's it, Clara said when Alara finished. I'm coming over. Where are you? Not at home. Then where? Alara hesitated. Somewhere safe. I can't explain right now, but I'm okay. I promise. Alara Voss, if you're in danger, I'm not. I'm being careful. I just need some time to figure things out. They talked for a few more minutes, Clara extracting promises to check in daily, to call if anything changed, to not do anything stupid. Alara agreed to all of it, knowing that what she was already doing probably qualified as stupid by most definitions. After they hung up, the apartment settled into silence. Alara explored slowly, trailing her fingers along book spines, examining art on the walls. Everything spoke of careful curation, of someone who understood beauty and restraint. It reminded her of the museum in a way, same quiet reverence for things worth preserving. She found herself in what was clearly Adrian's study. A massive desk dominated one wall, its surface clean except for a single lamp and a leather journal. She shouldn't look. Shouldn't invade his privacy the way he'd invaded hers with his research. She looked anyway. The journal was filled with neat handwriting, notes, and observations and occasional sketches. Nothing personal, mostly business, names and figures and strategic observations. But tucked into the back pages, she found something different. A sketch of a woman at a restaurant table, her face turned away, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. It took Alara a moment to recognize herself. The detail was remarkable. The exact angle of her hunched posture, the way her hand gripped her water glass, the careful study of someone who'd been watching without her knowledge. But there was something else in the sketch too, something in the line work that suggested not cruelty or objectification, but curiosity. Wonder, even. I drew that the night we met. Alara spun, nearly dropping the journal. Adrian stood in the study doorway, still in his coat, looking exhausted in a way that somehow made him seem more human. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I shouldn't have… It's fine. He moved into the room, shrugging off his coat. You're allowed to know the person you're trusting. Am I? Trusting you? I hope so. Adrian took the journal gently from her hands, studying the sketch. You looked so small that night, so determined to take up as little space as possible. It made me angry. Why? Because no one should have to live like that, especially not someone like you. You don't know what I'm like. Then tell me. Adrian set the journal down and met her eyes. Tell me who Alara Voss is when her sister isn't actively trying to destroy her. It was a challenge and an invitation and possibly the most terrifying question anyone had ever asked her. Because Alara didn't know the answer, didn't know who she was separate from the fear and the shame and the constant grinding effort of trying to be invisible. I don't know, she admitted. Then maybe, Adrian said quietly, it's time to find out. The silence that followed Adrian's words stretched thin between them, fragile as spun glass. Alara wanted to look away, to break eye contact and retreat into the familiar safety of invisibility, but something in his steady gaze held her in place. He wasn't demanding an answer, just waiting, patient in a way that suggested he had all the time in the world. "I like quiet places," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Museums after hours, libraries, anywhere the world feels paused. I like art that no one else pays attention to, the small paintings in corners, the ones without drama or spectacle. I like tea better than coffee. I read the same books over and over because new ones feel like too much risk." She paused, embarrassed by how mundane it all sounded. "That's not very interesting." "It's honest," Adrian said. "That makes it interesting." "You say that a lot, about honesty." "Because it's rare." He moved to the window, and Alara found it easier to breathe without his full attention on her. "Most people I know have spent so long performing that they've forgotten what's real underneath. You haven't. That's worth something. Or it means I'm just bad at performing. Maybe it means you're good at being yourself." Adrian turned back to her. "Have you eaten? It's past 9. The subject change was so abrupt that Alara almost laughed. "No, I came straight here." "Then let's fix that." He headed toward what she assumed was the kitchen. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage pasta. You're not allergic to anything?" "No." Alara followed him, feeling off balance. This wasn't how she'd imagined the evening going, hiding in a strange apartment, watching a man who commanded enough power to frighten her sister make pasta like it was the most normal thing in the world. The kitchen was smaller than the other rooms, efficient rather than showy. Adrian moved through it with the same economy of motion he applied to everything else, pulling ingredients from cabinets, setting water to boil. His sleeves were rolled up now, exposing forearms marked with old scars, thin white lines that spoke of violence survived. Alara found herself staring at them until Adrian noticed. "Knife fight," he said simply, following her gaze. "Long time ago. I was younger and stupider." "What were you fighting about?" "Territory, money, the usual things men fight about when they're too proud to walk away." He added salt to the water, not looking at her. "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Alara. You should know that before you decide to trust me." "Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm trying to be honest with you. Same thing you're doing for me." The pasta was simple: olive oil, garlic, herbs, parmesan. They ate at the kitchen island, sitting on stools that were just uncomfortable enough to keep the moment from feeling too domestic, too intimate. Adrian asked her about the museum, and Alara found herself talking about her work in a way she rarely did: the satisfaction of tracing a painting's history, the puzzle of authentication, the quiet thrill of discovering something everyone else had missed. "You love it," Adrian observed. "Your whole face changes when you talk about it." It's the only place I've ever felt like I belonged." Alara pushed pasta around her plate. "Pathetic, right? That I'm more comfortable with dead artists than living people." "Not pathetic, self-aware." Adrian stood, collecting their plates. "Though I think you sell yourself short on the living people front. You've known me for a week, less than a week. Long enough to see what you can't." He rinsed the dishes, his back to her. "You're not weak, Alara. You're just careful. There's a difference." Before she could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed. He checked it, and something in his expression shifted, hardened into the version of himself that had made Vera's companion back down at Luminaire. "What is it?" Alara asked. "Your sister." Adrian set the phone on the counter. "She's outside the Meridian, demanding to see me." Ice spread through Alara's chest. "How did she know you'd be there?" "She didn't. She's been there for 3 hours, according to building security. Just waiting." Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. "Do you want to know what she told them?" Alara wasn't sure she did, but she nodded anyway. "That she's you, that we had plans tonight and I stood her up, that she's worried about me." Adrian finally looked at Alara, and his eyes were cold in a way that should have frightened her but somehow didn't. "She's committed to the performance." "What are you going to do?" "Nothing. Let her wait. Let her understand that I'm not interested in whatever game she's playing." He picked up his phone again, typed something. "I'm having Marcus make it clear that if she returns, she'll be escorted off the property by police." "That'll just make her angrier." "Good. Angry people make mistakes." Adrian moved back around the island, studying Alara's face. "You're scared of her." It wasn't a question. but Alara answered anyway. Yes. Why? What's the worst thing she's ever done to you? The question opened something inside Alara that she'd kept locked for years. She looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap, and the words came out before she could stop them. When we were 16, I had a boyfriend, first one ever. His name was David, and he was quiet like me, kind. We'd spend hours in the library together, just reading side by side. The memory hurt, sharp and fresh despite the years. Vera found out, decided she wanted him, not because she actually did, just because I had something that made me happy. What happened? Adrian's voice was gentle now, careful. She seduced him. Took maybe a week. Then she got bored and dumped him, but not before making sure he told me every detail of what they'd done. How much better she was. How he'd only dated me because he was too shy to approach her. Alara forced herself to meet Adrian's eyes. I know it sounds childish, ancient history, but it taught me something, that anything I cared about, Vera would take, just to prove she could. That's why you don't let yourself care about things, Adrian said quietly. Or people. It's safer. It's half a life. The words stung because they were true. Alara stood abruptly, needing distance. I should go to bed. It's late. Alara, which room is mine? Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Down the hall, second door on the left. There's an ensuite bathroom. Take whatever you need. She fled before he could say anything else that might crack her open further. The bedroom was simple, elegant, the bed covered in white linens that looked impossibly soft. Alara locked the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart racing. This was a mistake. All of it. She should leave, go back to her apartment, face Vera like an adult, instead of hiding behind a man she barely knew. Except she was so tired of facing Vera alone, of losing every single confrontation, of being diminished until there was almost nothing left. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I know you're with him, enjoying his money, his protection, but you can't hide forever, little sister, and when you come out, I'll be waiting. Vera. Of course Vera had her number. Vera had everything, always. Alara deleted the text and turned off her phone. Then she showered, washing away the day's accumulated tension, and crawled into the unfamiliar bed in clothes borrowed from her own hastily packed bag. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes, dragging her into dreams where she was chased through endless museum galleries by someone wearing her own face. She woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, Alara couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back in a rush. Vera, Adrian, the safe house. She checked her phone. 8:47 a.m., Saturday. No work, no obligations, nowhere she needed to be except here, hiding. The apartment was quiet when she emerged. She followed the coffee smell to the kitchen and found a note in Adrian's neat handwriting. Had to handle some business. Make yourself at home. Back by noon. Alara poured coffee and wandered through the apartment, examining it properly in daylight. The bookshelves were filled with an eclectic mix: Russian literature, military strategy, art history, philosophy. She pulled out a worn copy of Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov and found notes in the margins, Adrian's handwriting analyzing passages about morality and justice. She was curled up on the couch, deep into the annotated novel, when the apartment door opened. Alara tensed, but it was Adrian carrying a leather portfolio and looking like he hadn't slept. You're reading my books, he said, something that might have been pleasure crossing his face. Sorry, I got curious. Don't apologize, that's what they're for. He set the portfolio down and crossed to the kitchen, pouring his own coffee. Did you sleep? Better than I expected. Alara closed the book carefully, marking her place. What kind of business? Adrian was quiet for a moment, debating something. Then he said, the kind that ensures your sister understands consequences. What does that mean? It means I made some calls, applied some pressure in places where it matters. He took a long sip of coffee. Vera works in PR, correct? For a firm in Midtown? Yes. How did you write, research? Her firm has several clients who are, let's say, friendly to my interests. As of this morning, those clients have been advised that Vera's continued employment represents a liability. Adrian's expression was neutral, but there was steel underneath. She'll likely be fired by Monday. Alara stood, the book sliding forgotten to the couch. You can't do that. I already did. You can't just... She needs that job. She'll know it was because of me. It was because of her own actions. Adrian set his coffee down. She broke into your apartment, harassed your roommate, and is currently stalking me. Those are choices she made. This is the consequence. You don't understand. This will make everything worse. She'll what? Escalate? She was already escalating, Alara. At what point were you planning to draw a line? The question hit like a slap. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's warmth. You had no right. Maybe not, but I have the ability and I used it. She needed to understand that you're not alone anymore, that hurting you has a cost. I didn't ask you to fight my battles. No, you asked me to help you stay safe. This is what that looks like. Adrian moved closer, and Alara fought the urge to back away. I know you're angry, but think about what she was doing, Alara. Think about where this was headed. She wasn't going to stop, not until she'd taken everything from you, including... He cut himself off, but Alara heard the unfinished thought anyway, including me. He meant himself, this strange, dangerous man who'd somehow decided she was worth protecting. I need air, she said abruptly. I need to go outside. That's not safe. I don't care. I can't stay locked in here like a prisoner. Then I'll come with you. Adrian was already reaching for his jacket. Marcus can drive us somewhere public. Your choice where. They ended up in Central Park, walking paths that Alara had traversed hundreds of times, but that felt different with Adrian beside her. Marcus followed at a discreet distance, close enough to respond to trouble, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. The October air was crisp, the trees showing off their autumn colors like they were competing for attention. Families picnicked on the grass. Runners passed in steady streams. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that Alara's entire world was fracturing into something unrecognizable. I'm sorry, Adrian said finally, for overstepping. I should have consulted you first. Why didn't you? Because I knew you'd say no, that you'd tell me to leave it alone, to let Vera do whatever she wanted because fighting back seemed worse than surrender. He stopped walking, turned to face her. But you're wrong about that, Alara. Surrender doesn't make you safe. It just makes you a permanent target. You don't know what it's like, being the weak one, the broken one, the one who can't... Yes, I do. The words came out sharp, cutting through her protest. You think I built what I have by being strong from the beginning? I was weak once, broken, and people like your sister, people who hunt vulnerability like it's sport, they almost destroyed me. Alara stared at him, seeing past the composed exterior to something raw underneath. What happened? I learned to become someone they couldn't destroy, someone who fought back harder than they fought. Adrian's jaw tightened. I'm not saying it was right. There are things I did, lines I crossed, that I can't undo. But I'm still here, and the people who tried to break me aren't. The implication was clear, and it should have frightened her. Instead, Alara felt something else, a dark, shameful relief that someone was finally willing to treat Vera the way Vera treated everyone else. I don't want to be like her, Alara whispered. Cruel, vindictive. You're not. Fighting back isn't the same as being cruel. It's just refusing to die quietly. Adrian started walking again, and Alara fell into step beside him. Your sister has spent your entire life convincing you that you're less than her, that you deserve what she does to you. But she's wrong, Alara. And deep down she knows it. That's why she can't leave you alone. What do you mean? If you were really nothing, really as worthless as she wants you to believe, she wouldn't need to keep proving it. The fact that she does means she's afraid. Of what? Of the possibility that you might realize you don't need to be invisible to survive, that you could step into the light and still be okay. They walked in silence for a while, the park unfolding around them in shades of gold and amber. Alara tried to imagine it, being visible, being seen, without the constant fear of judgment or attack. It felt impossible, like trying to picture a color that didn't exist. Her phone buzzed. She turned it back on that morning, a decision she was already regretting. The text was from Clara. Vera called me, said you're in danger, that some man is controlling you. She sounds really worried, Elle. What's going on? Alara showed the message to Adrian, who read it with an expression of grim unsurprise. She's establishing a narrative, he said, making herself the concerned sister, me the villain. By the time this is over, she'll have convinced everyone that she was trying to save you. Should I respond? That's up to you, but anything you say will be used as ammunition. Your sister is very good at weaponizing other people's care. Alara typed out a response carefully. I'm safe. I promise. Vera is lying. She broke into my apartment and has been stalking me. Please don't believe anything she says. I'll explain everything soon. Clara's response came almost immediately. Okay, I trust you, but Elle, please be careful. This all sounds really scary. I am. I have help. She pocketed the phone and found Adrian watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. You're starting to fight back. Small steps, but they count. Texting my friend isn't exactly fighting. It is when the alternative is staying silent and letting your sister control the story. Adrian gestured toward a bench overlooking the lake. Can we sit for a minute? There's something I need to tell you. Dread pooled in Alara's stomach, but she sat. Marcus maintained his distance, a watchful presence at the edge of her peripheral vision. Your sister has been busy, Adrian began. She's made contact with several of my business associates, posing as you, trying to arrange meetings, gather information about my operations. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for her. That's not why I'm telling you this. Adrian's expression was serious. I'm telling you because she's not just trying to seduce me or steal whatever she thinks I represent. She's trying to find leverage, which means she's planning something bigger than public humiliation. Like what? I don't know yet. But people don't gather intelligence unless they're planning to use it. He paused. There's something else. I had my people look deeper into Vera's background. Did you know she's in significant debt? Credit cards, personal loans, some money owed to people who aren't particularly forgiving about late payments. Alara's stomach dropped. No, I didn't know. I think that's what this is really about. Not me specifically, but what I represent, access to money, to power, to a way out of whatever hole she's dug herself into. Adrian's voice softened slightly. Which makes her more dangerous, Alara. Desperate people take risks they wouldn't normally consider. What kind of risks? Adrian didn't answer immediately. When he did, his words were careful, measured. The kind that involve removing obstacles, permanently. The implications settled over Alara like ice water. You think she'd hurt me? Actually hurt me? I think she'd convince herself it was justified, that you were standing in the way of her survival, that you'd forced her hand. Adrian turned to face her fully. I've seen it before, Alara. Seen people rationalize terrible things when they're backed into corners, and your sister has already proven she doesn't have normal boundaries when it comes to you. Alara stood abruptly, needing to move. This is insane. She's my sister. We shared a womb. She wouldn't. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Because Vera had never treated their shared DNA as a bond. Only as a competition, Alara was perpetually losing. I hope I'm wrong, Adrian said quietly. But until I know for sure, I need you to stay somewhere safe, with people who can protect you. For how long? Until we find out what she's planning, until we can neutralize whatever threat she represents. He stood, moved to stand beside her. I know this isn't what you wanted, any of this, but we're past the point of hoping she'll just go away. They walked back toward where Marcus waited with the car, the autumn afternoon turning cold as clouds moved in. Alara felt numb, disconnected from her own body. A week ago, her biggest problem had been a blind date she didn't want to go on. Now she was hiding from her own sister, trusting a man who operated in moral gray areas she didn't fully understand, and confronting the possibility that Vera's cruelty might have limits darker than anything Alara had imagined. The drive back to the Chelsea apartment was quiet. Alara stared out the window, watching the city slide past in a blur of steel and glass and people living their uncomplicated lives. When they arrived, Adrian walked her up himself rather than letting Marcus handle it. I have meetings this afternoon, he said once they were inside. Security business. But Marcus will be downstairs if you need anything. And Alara, he hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, Adrian looked uncertain. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Marcus. Not delivery people, not maintenance, not anyone claiming to be from the building. Promise me. I promise. He left, and Alara was alone again with her thoughts and her fear, and the growing certainty that her life had crossed some invisible threshold from which there was no returning. She tried to distract herself with work, pulling up files on her laptop, attempting to focus on the authentication project she'd been neglecting. But the words swam before her eyes, meaningless. Instead, she found herself going through her phone's photo library, scrolling back through years of carefully curated invisibility. There were almost no pictures of her. A few group shots from museum events where she'd been unavoidably included. One or two selfies Claire had insisted on taking. That was it. Meanwhile, Vera's social media, which Alara looked at now with morbid curiosity, was an endless stream of perfectly composed images. Vera at restaurants, at parties, with friends who all looked as polished and perfect as she did. Hundreds of pictures, thousands of likes, a carefully constructed life that looked effortless. The most recent post was from 3 hours ago. A selfie taken in front of the Meridian, Vera's expression worried, vulnerable. The caption read, "Worried about my sister. If anyone has seen Alara Voss, please contact me. She's with someone dangerous and I'm scared for her safety. Hashtag find Alara." Hashtag sisterlove already. It had 200 likes and dozens of comments offering sympathy and support. Alara read through them with sick fascination, watching her sister weaponize concern, turn herself into the victim of a story she'd entirely fabricated. One comment stood out, from someone Alara didn't recognize. "Have you called the police? If she's really in danger, they can help." Vera's response, "I've tried. They say she's an adult and hasn't been reported missing officially, but I know something's wrong. I can feel it. She was building a case, creating a paper trail that would support whatever narrative she was planning to spin." Alara screenshotted the post and texted it to Adrian. His response came quickly. "I see it. Already working on damage control. Don't engage. Don't respond to any comments. Stay invisible. Stay invisible." The story of her life condensed into 2 words. Alara was making tea when her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then listened to the message immediately, some self-destructive impulse making her press play. "Alara, it's me." Vera's voice, sweet and concerned. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me right now. I know things got out of hand at the restaurant, but I'm worried about you, little sister. This man you're with. I've been asking around. He's dangerous. Connected to things you don't understand. Please, come home, or at least call me so I know you're okay. I love you. I'm sorry for everything. Please." The performance was flawless. If Alara hadn't known better, hadn't spent 28 years learning to decode Vera's manipulations, she might have actually believed it. She deleted the voicemail and turned her phone off entirely. The afternoon bled into evening. Alara ordered food from a delivery app, then remembered Adrian's warning and canceled it, made do with pasta and jarred sauce from the kitchen instead, eating alone at the counter while the city darkened outside the windows. Adrian returned at 8, looking exhausted. "I brought dinner," he said, holding up bags from a restaurant Alara didn't recognize. "Thai. I hope that's okay. I already ate, but thank you. Then I'll eat and you can keep me company." He unpacked containers, and the smell of spices filled the kitchen. "Have you been okay?" Define okay. A slight smile crossed Adrian's face. "Fair point." He began eating, and they sat in silence for a while before he spoke again. "I've been thinking about your sister's endgame. And I think she's going to make a move soon. The social media campaign, the phone call, the way she's positioning herself, it's all building towards something, a confrontation maybe, or a play for public sympathy that forces your hand." "What kind of play?" "I don't know yet. But when it happens, I need you to be ready, to not let her manipulate you into doing something you'll regret." Alara wrapped her arms around herself. "Like what?" "Like going back to her. Like believing she's changed or that things can be different." Adrian set down his fork. "People like Vera don't change, Alara. They just get better at hiding who they really are." "You sound very certain about that." "I am." His expression darkened. "Because I used to be like her. Ruthless, willing to do whatever it took to win. And I didn't change because I suddenly developed a conscience. I changed because I got tired. Tired of the performance, tired of the emptiness, tired of waking up and not recognizing the person looking back from the mirror. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her, raw and undefended. Alara found herself looking at him differently, seeing past the control to something more complicated underneath. "What changed you?" she asked quietly. "Loss. I lost someone I cared about because I was too focused on winning to protect what actually mattered." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I don't talk about it, but you should know. I understand the cost of being the person your sister is, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone." Before Alara could respond, the building's fire alarm shrieked to life. Adrian was on his feet instantly, all exhaustion vanishing. "Stay here." "What?" "No, if there's a fire." "There's no fire." His voice was hard, certain. "This is her. This is the move." And suddenly Alara understood. The alarm, the forced evacuation, the chaos that would follow. It was a way to flush her out, to force her into the open where Vera could control the situation. Adrian was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone. "Marcus, status." A pause. "I don't care what the building manager says. This is a false alarm. Get up here now." He hung up and turned to Alara. "We're leaving. Back entrance. Now." "But, now, Alara." His tone left no room for argument. They were moving toward the door when it happened, a sound that would haunt Alara's nightmares for weeks afterward. Not the alarm, which was still shrieking. Something else, something breaking in the hallway outside. Adrian shoved her toward the bedroom. "Lock yourself in the bathroom. Don't come out until I tell you to." "Adrian, go!" She ran, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard the apartment door crash open, heard voices, multiple voices, male, aggressive. Then sounds of a scuffle, impact, someone grunting in pain. Alara locked the bathroom door with shaking hands and pulled out her phone, turned it on, dialed 911 with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. 911? What's your emergency? Someone broke into the apartment. There's fighting. I'm hiding in the bathroom. What's your location? Alara gave the address, her voice shaking. The operator kept her on the line, asking questions, promising police were on the way. But all Alara could hear was the chaos on the other side of the door, the sounds of violence that suggested Adrian was outnumbered but not outmatched. Then silence. Terrible, complete silence. "Adrian?" Her voice came out as a whisper. No response. "Adrian!" The bathroom door handle turned, locked. Someone pushed against it, testing. Alara. Not Adrian's voice. Someone else. Male. Unfamiliar. "Come out. We're not going to hurt you. Your sister sent us. She's worried about you." Lies. All lies. Alara backed into the corner, her phone clutched in her hand. "The police are coming," she called out, trying to make her voice strong. "They're on their way." Laughter from the other side of the door. "Then I guess we better make this quick." The door splintered inward with the first kick. The second kick sent wood splintering across the bathroom floor. Alara pressed herself into the corner, her phone still clutched in her hand. The 911 operator's voice, a tinny stream of reassurance that meant nothing against the immediate reality of the door giving way. Then gunfire. Not in the bathroom, but close. 3 shots in rapid succession, the sound so loud it made Alara's ears ring. The kicking stopped. She heard bodies hitting the floor, heavy and final, and then Adrian's voice cutting through the chaos. "Alara, it's me. It's over. You can come out." She didn't move. Couldn't. Her legs had stopped working, her entire body locked in place by adrenaline and terror. "Alara." His voice was closer now, just outside the damaged door. "I need you to look at me. I need you to see it's me." Slowly, shaking so hard her teeth chattered, Alara looked up. Adrian stood in the doorway, blood on his knuckles, his shirt torn at the shoulder. Behind him, she could see 2 men on the ground, not moving, not dead. She could see their chests rising and falling, but definitely unconscious. "Are you hurt?" Adrian asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Alara shook her head. Words wouldn't come. "The police are coming. We need to leave before they arrive. Can you walk?" She tried. Her legs buckled and Adrian caught her before she hit the floor, his arms solid and steady around her trembling frame. "I've got you," he said quietly, "but we have to move now." Marcus appeared in the hallway, stepping over the unconscious men with professional indifference. "Car's running. Back exit is clear." "The fire alarm?" Adrian asked. "Already shut off. Building manager's been handled." Marcus's expression was grim. "But those two are just advance. There's a woman in the lobby asking about apartment residents. Description matches the sister." Adrian's jaw tightened. He looked down at Alara, still shaking in his arms. "Can you stand?" This time her legs cooperated barely. Adrian kept one arm around her waist as they moved through the apartment, stepping over destruction and broken furniture. The front door hung off its hinges. In the living room, two more men lay unconscious, cable ties securing their wrists. "You did this?" Alara whispered. "All four of them?" "I had motivation." Adrian guided her toward the service stairs. "And they were hired muscle, not professionals. Sloppy." They descended 6 flights in silence, Alara's legs working on autopilot while her mind tried to process what had just happened. Someone had broken into the apartment. Multiple someones. Sent by Vera. To do what? Take her? Hurt her? The man's voice echoed in her memory, "Your sister sent us." And the casual certainty in those words made her stomach turn. The car was waiting in the service alley, engine running. Marcus held the door open and they slid inside, the vehicle moving before the door fully closed. Alara caught a glimpse of police cars pulling up to the building's main entrance, lights flashing against the darkness. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safer." Adrian pulled out his phone, typed rapidly, "I underestimated your sister's resources. That won't happen again." "Those men, did you kill them?" "No, though I considered it." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "But dead bodies bring complications we don't need right now." Alara pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting nausea. This was real. This was actually happening. Her sister had hired men to break into an apartment and take her, and only Adrian's violence had prevented whatever came next. "I'm going to be sick," she managed. Marcus had a bag ready before she finished the sentence, like he'd done this before. Alara threw up while the car moved through Manhattan traffic, her entire body rejecting the reality it couldn't process. Adrian held her hair back with one hand, his other hand rubbing small circles on her back until the heaving stopped. "Sorry," she gasped. "Don't be. Adrenaline crash is normal." Adrian handed her a bottle of water. Small sips. The water helped. So did the breathing exercises Adrian talked her through, his voice calm and steady until her heart rate slowed from sprint to merely elevated. By the time the car stopped, Alara could almost think again. They'd arrived at what looked like an industrial building in Brooklyn, all brick and metal and no obvious signage. Marcus led them through a loading dock to an elevator that required a key card and a fingerprint scan. The doors opened onto a space that was part apartment, part fortress, reinforced walls, security monitors, the kind of setup that suggested serious people took serious precautions here. "What is this place?" Alara asked. "Safe house, one of several." Adrian guided her to a couch. "No one knows about this except me, Marcus, and 2 other people I'd trust with my life. Your sister won't find you here." "She found the Chelsea apartment." "Because I got careless, assumed she'd stick to social manipulation instead of hiring thugs." Adrian's expression was grim. "I won't make that mistake twice." Marcus appeared with a first aid kit. "You're bleeding." Adrian looked down at his shoulder where blood had soaked through his torn shirt. "It's nothing. It's a knife wound. Sit down." For the first time since Alara had met him, Adrian actually obeyed someone else's order. He sat while Marcus cut away the ruined shirt, revealing a gash across his shoulder that was definitely not nothing. "You need stitches," Marcus said. "Later. Clean it and wrap it for now." Alara watched as Marcus worked with efficient competence, cleaning the wound with movements that suggested medical training. Adrian didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just sat there like having a knife wound treated was routine maintenance. "How did they get a knife into you?" Alara asked quietly. "I was distracted, worried about you." Adrian met her eyes. "Won't happen again." Marcus finished wrapping the shoulder and stepped back. "I'm posting security on the perimeter. No one gets within a block without me knowing." "Good. And Marcus, find out who those men were, who hired them, how much they were paid, what their orders were." Adrian's voice turned cold. "I want everything." Marcus nodded and left. Alara and Adrian sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like concrete. I should call the police, Alara said finally. Tell them what happened, that Vera hired those men. Do you have proof? They said she sent them. To you, in a bathroom, with no witnesses and no recording. Adrian shook his head. All you have is your word against hers. And she spent the last week building a narrative that I'm the dangerous one, that you're being controlled. Who do you think they'll believe? The truth of it hit Alara like a physical blow. Vera had been planning this, laying groundwork, establishing a story that would make Alara look unreliable. Adrian looked predatory, and herself looked like the concerned sister trying to save a sibling in danger. So she just gets away with it? Alara's voice broke. She tries to have me kidnapped, and there's no consequence? I didn't say that. Adrian stood, moving to the windows. Outside, Brooklyn spread in a grid of lights and shadows. But we need to be smart about this. Legal consequences require evidence, witnesses, proof. Right now, we have none of those things. Then what do we do? Adrian turned to face her, and there was something in his expression that Alara had seen before but never directed at her. Cold calculation, strategic assessment, the look of someone planning a war. We make her come to us, he said, on our terms. And when she does, we make sure there are witnesses, evidence, everything needed to ensure she can't talk her way out of consequences. How? By giving her what she wants. A meeting, a confrontation, but controlled, documented, and with backup ready to intervene the moment she makes her move. Adrian moved back to the couch, sat beside her. But Alara, I need you to be honest with me. Can you face her? Can you stand in front of your sister and not fold? Could she? Alara had spent 28 years folding, retreating, making herself smaller. The instinct was so ingrained it felt like breathing. But something had shifted tonight. Watching those men break through the door, hearing the certainty in their voices, understanding that Vera had escalated from cruelty to actual violence. It had burned away some essential layer of denial that Alara had wrapped around herself like armor. Vera wasn't going to stop, wasn't going to get bored and move on to other targets. This was personal in a way that transcended sibling rivalry into something darker, more obsessive. I don't know, Alara admitted, but I can't keep running forever. That's not what I asked. Alara met his eyes. Then no. I don't know if I can face her without folding, but I'm willing to try. That's enough. Adrian pulled out his phone. I'm going to make some calls, get cleaned up, try to rest. Tomorrow we start planning. The bathroom in the safe house was utilitarian. No luxury here, just function. Alara showered, watching the water circle the drain and trying to wash away the adrenaline still coursing through her system. Her hands were finally steady, but her mind kept replaying the moment the door splintered, the sound of gunfire, the casual way Marcus had stepped over unconscious bodies. This was Adrian's world, violence and strategy and calculated responses to threats. A world she'd stumbled into because she'd been kind to her in a moment of humiliation. And now she was in too deep to extract herself without consequences. She dressed in clothes from her hastily packed bag and emerged to find Adrian on the phone, speaking in rapid-fire sentences to someone who kept interrupting. I don't care what it costs, Adrian was saying. I want every piece of documentation on those 4 men by morning. Bank records, phone logs, who they've been in contact with. Everything. A pause. Yes, I'm aware that's not strictly legal. Do it anyway. He hung up and turned to find Alara watching him. You break a lot of laws, don't you? She asked. Only when following them would get people hurt. Adrian set his phone down. Does that bother you? It should. But it doesn't? Alara thought about it honestly. I don't know what bothers me anymore. A week ago, I would have said violence is never the answer. But a week ago, I hadn't watched my sister hire men to kidnap me. Your moral framework is adjusting to new information. That's not weakness, it's adaptation. Adrian moved to the kitchen area, began making tea without asking if she wanted any. But you should know what you're getting into here, Alara. If we do this, if we set a trap for Vera, it's going to get ugly. She'll say things designed to break you. She'll use every insecurity, every fear, every moment of weakness against you. And you'll have to stand there and take it while we gather evidence. Why do I have to be the bait? Because she won't come for me. I'm not what she wants. Not really. Adrian poured tea into 2 mugs. She wants to prove she's better than you, that she can take anything you have. The only way to draw her out is to give her the opportunity to do exactly that. The tea was chamomile, probably chosen for its calming properties. Elara wrapped her hands around the warm mug and tried to imagine standing across from Vera, absorbing her cruelty, not retreating into the familiar pattern of surrender. "What if I can't do it?" she asked quietly. "What if I freeze or fold or just break?" "Then we'll find another way." Adrian sat beside her. "But Elara, I've watched you this past week. You're stronger than you think. You came to my penthouse even though you were terrified. You're here now instead of running back to your apartment. You called 911 when those men broke in instead of just hiding. Those are brave choices. They're survival choices. Sometimes those are the same thing." They sat in silence, drinking tea, until Elara's exhaustion finally caught up with the adrenaline crash. Adrian showed her to a bedroom, sparse, clean, a bed that looked like it had never been slept in. "Try to rest," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." But sleep was impossible. Elara lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through scenarios. Vera's face when she realized the trap, the things she'd say, the weapons she'd deploy. 28 years of ammunition loaded and ready to fire. Sometime near dawn, Elara must have dozed off because she woke to daylight and the smell of coffee. She emerged to find Adrian already up, dressed, looking like he'd slept even less than she had. Marcus was there too, along with another man Elara didn't recognize, tall, wire-thin, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "Elara, this is Ryan," Adrian said. "He's going to help us with the technical aspects of documenting your sister's confession." "Confession?" Elara accepted the coffee Adrian handed her. "You think she'll just confess to hiring those men?" "If we push the right buttons, yes." Ryan had the kind of voice that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "People confess when they think they've already won. When they're gloating. Your sister strikes me as the gloating type." "You have no idea," Elara muttered. "Actually, I do. I've been reviewing her social media, her communications, everything we can access legally and otherwise." Ryan pulled out a tablet, swiped through screens. "She's a narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. She needs validation, needs to be seen as superior. That's her weakness." "How is that a weakness?" "Because it means she can't resist explaining how she won. Can't resist making sure you know exactly how she beat you." Ryan looked up. "So we give her the opportunity, we set up a meeting, wire you for sound and video, and let her talk herself into a corner." Elara's stomach clenched. "Where would this meeting happen?" "Somewhere public but private," Adrian said. "Controlled but believable. My penthouse at the Meridian, maybe. Or a restaurant private dining room. Somewhere she'd believe we chose for the confrontation she thinks she's manipulating us into. And if she doesn't confess, if she's smarter than we're giving her credit for, then we have documentation of threats, harassment, intimidation. It's not nothing." Marcus spoke from near the window, where he'd been maintaining his watchful silence. "But Adrian's right. She'll talk. Her type always does." The plan took shape over the next several hours. Adrian would reach out to Vera, tell her that Elara wanted to meet, that she was ready to step aside, to let Vera have whatever she wanted, but that she wanted to do it face to face. The bait was dignity, giving Vera the opportunity to witness Elara's surrender personally, to savor the victory in real time. "She'll know it's a trap," Elara said. "She'll suspect," Adrian corrected, "but her need to win will override her caution. That's the bet we're making." They spent the afternoon preparing. Ryan showed Elara the recording equipment, tiny microphones that would be sewn into her clothing, cameras disguised as jewelry, backup recording devices placed throughout whatever location they chose. The technology was impressive and invasive in equal measure. "You'll have a panic word," Ryan explained. "Something you can say that will trigger an immediate response from Adrian and Marcus. They'll be monitoring from another room, ready to intervene the moment things go wrong." "What's the panic word?" "Your choice. Something you'd never naturally say in conversation with your sister." Elara thought about it. "Museum. She hates museums. I never talk about my work around her." "Museum it is." By evening, the plan was set. Adrian would contact Vera through an intermediary, arrange a meeting for the following night at his penthouse. The Meridian had enough security infrastructure to document everything without being obvious about it. And if Vera brought backup, more hired thugs or worse, they'd be identified and neutralized before they got close. What if she doesn't come alone? Ilara asked. Then we adapt. Adrian's confidence was absolute, unshakable. But I don't think she will. She'll want this victory to be personal, intimate. Just the three of us so she can watch you break without interference. The casual certainty with which he predicted her sister's behavior should have been reassuring. Instead, it just reminded Ilara how transparent she must be too, how easily Adrian could probably read her own patterns and predict her own choices. You're thinking too loud, Adrian said, reading her expression. What's wrong? If you can predict Vera this easily, what does that say about me? How easily you can manipulate what I'll do? The question hung between them, sharp and uncomfortable. Adrian was quiet for a long moment before answering. I could predict you'd be terrified right now, that you'd be questioning this plan, questioning me, questioning yourself. That's not manipulation, Ilara. That's empathy. He moved closer, and his voice softened. The difference between reading someone and manipulating them is what you do with the information. I'm using it to protect you. Your sister uses it to hurt you. Those aren't the same thing. How do I know that? You don't. Not for certain. Trust is always a risk. Adrian didn't look away, didn't try to charm or convince, just stated the truth and waited. But I'm asking you to take that risk anyway, because the alternative is letting your sister win by making you too afraid to accept help. Ilara wanted to argue, to find holes in his logic, to protect herself from the vulnerability of trust. But exhaustion and fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope, made her nod instead. Okay, she said, let's do this. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Ryan outfitted Ilara with recording equipment, showed her how to position herself for optimal audio and video capture, drilled her on staying calm under pressure. Adrian coached her on what to say, how to draw Vera out without being obvious about it. And Marcus ran security scenarios, planning for every possible contingency. Through it all, Ilara felt disconnected from her own body, watching herself prepare for a confrontation she still wasn't sure she could survive. The girl who'd hidden in museums and made herself small was going to stand across from her sister and refuse to break. It felt impossible. It felt insane. It felt necessary. The day of the meeting arrived with cold rain and gray skies. Ilara dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, nothing that would signal she was preparing for battle. Just her usual neutral colors, her usual invisibility, with tiny cameras and microphones hidden in seams and buttons. Remember, Ryan said, doing a final equipment check. She can't know you're recording. No looking at cameras, no adjusting microphones, no paranoid behavior. Just be yourself. Terrified? Yes, that's believable. She expects you to be scared. Ryan's expression softened slightly. But Ilara, you're not alone in this. We'll be watching. The moment you say the word, we intervene. Adrian drove her to the Meridian himself, the city sliding past the car windows in streaks of rain and neon. Ilara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to still the trembling, but it was useless. She's going to see right through this, Ilara said. She's going to know. Let her suspect. As long as she can't prove it, her arrogance will push her forward. Adrian glanced at her. And Ilara? Whatever she says to you tonight, it's not true. None of it. She's going to try to destroy you with words. Don't let her. Easy for you to say. No, it's not. Adrian's voice was quiet. I know what it's like to have someone use your own insecurities as weapons, to feel like they can see right through you to everything you're afraid of. It's a special kind of hell. But you survive it by remembering that their words are just tactical strikes, not truth. They pulled up to the Meridian. Through the rain-streaked windows, Ilara could see the building rising into the dark sky, all glass and steel and money. Somewhere up there, Vera was probably already waiting, relishing the anticipated victory. Last chance to back out, Adrian said. Ilara took a breath, then another. No, let's finish this. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt interminable. Ilara watched the numbers climb, 20, 25, 30, and tried to remember everything she'd been taught. Stay calm, draw her out, document everything, say the panic word if things go wrong. The doors opened directly into Adrian's penthouse. It looked different than Alara remembered. Furniture had been rearranged slightly, probably to optimize camera angles. Ryan would be in another room, monitoring feeds. Marcus would be positioned nearby, ready to respond. And there, standing by the windows with her back to the elevator, was Vera. She turned as they entered, and Alara's breath caught. It was like looking in a mirror, except the reflection was everything she wasn't: confident, composed, perfectly styled. Vera wore red again, always red, the color of power and blood. "Hello, little sister," Vera said, and her smile was all triumph. "I'm so glad you finally came to your senses." Alara forced herself to step out of the elevator. Adrian remained beside her, a steady presence, but he'd warned her he wouldn't speak unless absolutely necessary. This was her confrontation, her chance to face the monster who wore her face. "Vera," Alara managed, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "And Mr. Cade. Finally, we meet properly." Vera's attention shifted to Adrian, and Alara recognized the look in her eyes. Calculation, seduction, the same expression she'd worn when she'd destroyed Alara's relationship with David all those years ago. "I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have." Adrian's voice was professionally neutral, though I suspect most of it was information you gathered without consent. "Research, due diligence, call it what you want." Vera moved away from the window, circling closer. "I like to know who I'm dealing with." "Then you know I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." The rebuff was subtle but clear. Vera's expression flickered, just for a moment, before smoothing back into practiced charm. "We'll see. But I'm not here for you, Mr. Cade. I'm here for my sister." She turned to Alara, and the weight of her attention was crushing, suffocating. Alara wanted to look away, to find somewhere safe to rest her eyes, but she forced herself to meet Vera's gaze. "You look tired," Vera said, mock sympathy dripping from every word. "Has being on the run been hard on you? All that hiding, all that fear." "I wasn't running from you," Alara said quietly. "No? Then why the secret apartments, the bodyguards, the elaborate security measures?" Vera gestured around the penthouse. "All this because you're not afraid of me?" "Please, Alara, don't insult my intelligence. You hired men to break into an apartment and kidnap me. That's not paranoia. That's a reasonable response to a real threat." There. The first accusation, delivered with only a slight tremor. Alara watched Vera's face, waiting for denial, for shock, for some performance of innocence. Instead, Vera laughed. "Kidnap you? Is that what you think happened?" She shook her head, delighted. "Those men were private investigators, Alara. I hired them to find you because I was worried, to make sure you were okay. The fact that they were overzealous in their methods, well, that's unfortunate, but hardly kidnapping." The lie was smooth, practiced, probably rehearsed, but there was something in Vera's eyes, a glitter of satisfaction, that suggested she knew Alara knew the truth and simply didn't care. "They broke down a door," Alara said. "Attacked Adrian. That's not investigation. They were defending themselves from a man with a violent reputation." Vera's voice turned sweet, poisonous. "Really, Alara, you should be thanking me. I was trying to save you from someone dangerous, from someone who's clearly been manipulating you, isolating you from people who actually care about you." "No one who actually cares about me has ever humiliated me in a restaurant full of people," Alara shot back. "No one who cares has spent 28 years making sure I know I'm worthless." Vera's smile widened. There it is. The victim complex. Always someone else's fault, isn't it, Alara? Never your own inadequacy. Never the fact that you're just less interesting, less ambitious, less everything. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its target with practiced precision. Alara felt herself starting to fold, to curl inward, to retreat into the familiar pattern. But Adrian's words echoed in her memory, tactical strikes, not truth, and she forced herself to stay upright. "Why are you here, Vera?" she asked. "What do you actually want?" "What I've always wanted. What's mine." Vera moved closer, and Alara forced herself not to step back. "You've been in my shadow our entire lives, little sister, hiding behind my accomplishments, benefiting from my success by association. And I've allowed it because you're family, because I felt sorry for you. You felt sorry for me, Alara repeated flatly. Of course. It must be hard being the broken one, the one who can't function in normal society, the one who needs museums and books and quiet corners because actual life is too overwhelming. Vera's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. I've protected you all these years, made excuses for you, explained away your social failures, and this is how you repay me? By stealing a man I wanted? By turning him against me? The delusion was staggering. Vera had actually convinced herself that she was the victim here, that Alara was the aggressor. It would have been funny if it wasn't so horrifying. I didn't steal anyone, Alara said. Adrian made his own choice, and he chose not you. Wrong thing to say. Alara saw it immediately in the way Vera's expression shifted, the mask of sympathy cracking to reveal something darker underneath. He chose wrong, Vera said, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. But that's fixable. Men always are. Once you're out of the picture, once he understands that you're nothing but a liability, he'll see reason. They always do. Once I'm out of the picture, Alara repeated. What does that mean, Vera? What exactly are you planning? And there it was, the moment where Vera could have backed down, could have claimed it was just a figure of speech, could have maintained plausible deniability. Instead, she smiled. And the smile was everything Alara had feared, everything Adrian had predicted, everything the recording equipment was capturing for posterity. It means you're going to disappear, little sister, Vera said, and there was genuine pleasure in her voice. Not permanently, not dead, just gone. Committed to psychiatric care for your own safety, maybe. Or lost somewhere far away where you can't interfere anymore. I haven't decided the details yet, but you will be gone. And Adrian will understand that I'm the one who can actually help him, the one worth his time and attention. Alara's mouth went dry. You're talking about having me institutionalized, kidnapped. I'm talking about removing an obstacle. Vera stepped closer, close enough that Alara could smell her perfume. Expensive, overwhelming. You've always been an obstacle, Alara. A weight around my neck. The disappointing twin. The one I have to explain and apologize for. I'm done carrying you. You never carried me. You've spent our entire lives tearing me down. Because you needed to understand your place. Vera's voice rose, control slipping for the first time. You were never supposed to matter, never supposed to be anything more than my shadow. But you couldn't even do that right, could you? You had to go and make yourself visible, had to draw the attention of a man who could actually matter. And that's not acceptable, Alara. That's not how this works. The confession was perfect, complete, everything they needed and more. But Alara couldn't focus on that because her sister, the person who'd shared a womb with her, who should have been her closest ally, was openly discussing ways to make her disappear. Why? The word came out broken. Why do you hate me so much? Vera's expression shifted into something that might have been genuine emotion, just for a second. Because you were the good one, she said quietly. Everyone said it when we were kids. Alara's so sweet. Alara's so thoughtful. Alara never causes trouble. And I had to be perfect, had to perform, had to win every competition because being good wasn't enough. I had to be better. And you made that impossible just by existing. The honesty was unexpected, raw. Alara stared at her sister and saw, perhaps for the first time, the damaged child underneath the performance. Not damaged the way Alara was damaged, but broken in a different way, twisted by different pressures into something cruel and calculating. That's not my fault, Alara said. No, but you're still the problem that needs solving. Vera stepped back, composure returning like armor. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step aside, gracefully, disappear on your own terms, or I'll make it happen on mine. And Adrian gets to choose which version of us he prefers, the one who's a liability or the one who can actually be useful. I already chose. Both women turned. Adrian had remained so still, so silent, that Alara had almost forgotten he was there. But now he stepped forward, positioning himself between Alara and Vera with deliberate precision. And you chose wrong, Vera said, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Once you understand what she really is, I understand exactly what she is. Someone who's been abused by her own family for 28 years and still managed to become kind, thoughtful, and genuine. Those aren't weaknesses, Vera. They're strengths you'll never possess. Adrian's voice was ice-cold, controlled. And what you are, a narcissist who can't stand the possibility that someone might choose substance over performance, that's not someone I'd ever willingly associate with. Vera's face went through several expressions at once: shock, fury, humiliation. Then it settled on something calculating and mean. "You're going to regret this," she said, addressing Adrian but looking at Alara. "Both of you. I have evidence of your illegal activities, Mr. Cade, recordings, documentation, and I have contacts in law enforcement who'd be very interested in what I've gathered, unless we can come to an arrangement." "Blackmail now?" Adrian almost sounded amused. "Your sister hires thugs to break into my property, threatens violence, and now you think threatening me with false evidence is going to work? It's not false. And even if it were, the investigation alone would destroy you. We both know how these things work." Vera pulled out her phone. "So I suggest we all calm down and discuss this like adults. Because I promise you, Mr. Cade, you don't want me as an enemy." "Too late for that." Adrian pulled out his own phone, typed something. "Though I appreciate you making this so easy." The penthouse doors opened. Marcus entered, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. Vera's expression shifted from confident to confused to, finally, afraid. "What is this?" she demanded. "This is you being arrested for attempted kidnapping, conspiracy to commit assault, harassment, stalking, and blackmail," Adrian said calmly. "Everything you've said tonight has been recorded, along with testimony from the 4 men you hired, who were very willing to cooperate once they understood the penalties they were facing and the benefits of turning state's evidence." Vera's face went pale. She looked at Alara, and for the first time in their lives, Alara saw genuine fear in her sister's eyes. "You set me up," Vera whispered. "I protected myself," Alara corrected. "Finally." One of the officers moved forward with handcuffs. Vera backed away, her performance of control completely shattered. "This is insane. You can't. I'm her sister. I would never actually hurt her. I was just talking, just venting. You can't arrest someone for words." "We can when those words constitute threats and conspiracy," the officer said. "Ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The fight went out of Vera all at once. She turned, was cuffed, was read her rights in a voice so mechanical it might as well have been a recording. Through it all, she stared at Alara with an expression that cycled through fury, betrayal, and something that might have been grief. "You'll regret this," Vera said as the officers led her toward the elevator. "You think you won, but you haven't. You're still nothing without me. Still invisible. He'll figure that out eventually, and you'll be alone again. That's all you'll ever be, Alara. Alone." The elevator doors closed on her words, and then she was gone. Just like that. 28 years of terror and cruelty ended with handcuffs and Miranda rights and the mechanical descent of an elevator. Alara stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the floor, her whole body shaking. Adrian was beside her immediately, his arms around her, anchoring her to reality. "You did it," he said quietly. "It's over. She can't hurt you anymore." "She's right, though," Alara heard herself say. "About me being nothing, about being invisible." "No, she's not." Adrian pulled back enough to look at her face. "She's desperate and defeated and saying whatever she thinks will hurt you most. But Alara, listen to me. You were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who refused to see you. That's their failure, not yours." Marcus approached, keeping a respectful distance. "Recording equipment worked perfectly. Ryan says we have everything we need for prosecution. Multiple felonies, clear intent, documented threats. She's going away for a long time." The reality of it hit Alara in waves. Vera was arrested, facing prison, gone from her life in a way that felt both impossible and inevitable. 28 years of waiting for her sister to change, to see her, to love her, ended not with reconciliation but with handcuffs. "I should feel relieved," Alara whispered. "Why don't I feel relieved?" "Because she's still your sister," Adrian said, "and grief doesn't follow logic. You can mourn what could have been while still protecting yourself from what is." They sat there on the floor of his penthouse, Alara shaking and Adrian holding her steady, until the trembling finally subsided and exhaustion took its place. Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm, indifferent to the small human drama that had just concluded in one more expensive apartment. What happens now? Ilara asked. Now you heal, Adrian said simply, and figure out who you want to be without her shadow over you. It should have been a happy ending. The villain defeated, the victim freed, justice served. But sitting there in the aftermath, Ilara felt hollowed out and uncertain, like she'd won a war but lost something essential in the process. And somewhere in a police station, her sister sat in a cell, wearing Ilara's face and plotting revenge that might never come. The thought should have been comforting. It wasn't. The numbness lasted 3 days. Ilara moved through the hours in a fog, going through motions that felt disconnected from any actual person. Adrian had offered to let her stay at the safe house for as long as she needed, but she'd return to her own apartment on the second day, needing the familiar walls and her own books and the illusion of normalcy even if nothing felt normal anymore. Sarah had welcomed her back with a fierce hug and no questions, which Ilara appreciated more than she could articulate. Clara had called 17 times before Ilara finally answered and explained a heavily edited version of what had happened. Her friend had offered to come over immediately, but Ilara had declined. She needed time alone with the strange, hollow feeling that had taken up residence in her chest. Vera's arraignment had been swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming: the recorded confession, testimony from the hired men, documented harassment, the break-in at the Chelsea apartment. The prosecutor had asked for remand without bail, citing flight risk and danger to others. The judge had agreed. Ilara hadn't attended. Couldn't face seeing her sister in an orange jumpsuit. Couldn't handle the media attention that had erupted once the story broke. Identical twins, one a curator at the Met, the other arrested for conspiracy to kidnap. The tabloids had loved it, spinning narratives about sibling rivalry gone psychotic, about jealousy and obsession and the dark side of sharing a face. Adrian had handled the press with cold efficiency, issuing statements through his lawyers that made it clear Ilara was a victim, not a participant. But the attention still felt invasive, violating. People at the museum whispered when she walked past. Strangers on the subway stared, trying to determine if she was the good twin or the evil one. On the 4th day after Vera's arrest, Ilara finally broke down. It happened at work, in the quiet of the conservation lab where she'd been attempting to focus on a Renaissance panel that needed cleaning. The painting depicted the Madonna and Child, the mother's face serene and loving as she cradled her infant. And something about that image, the uncomplicated devotion, the simple love between mother and child, cracked something inside Ilara that had been holding itself together through sheer force of will. She'd had a sister, a twin, someone who should have been her closest companion, her fiercest defender, her mirror and her match. And instead, Vera had been her tormentor, her critic, her systematic destroyer. And now she was gone, locked away, and Ilara couldn't even properly hate her because underneath everything was still the small, desperate hope that maybe, somehow, Vera could have been different. Daniel found her crying in the lab and, to his credit, didn't ask questions. Just sat with her in silence until the worst of it passed, then made her tea and told her to take the rest of the week off. "You've been through trauma," he said simply. "The paintings will still be here when you're ready. You need to take care of yourself first." So Ilara went home and did something she'd never allowed herself to do before. She actually grieved. Not for who Vera was, but for who she could have been. For the sister relationship they'd never had, and now never would. For the childhood that had been competition instead of companionship, and for all the years she'd spent making herself small in hopes that would somehow make Vera kinder. Adrian came by on the 5th day. Ilara hadn't called him, hadn't reached out since the night of Vera's arrest, but he showed up anyway with takeout and the quiet understanding that sometimes presence mattered more than words. They ate in silence on her couch, the apartment dark except for the glow of streetlights through the windows. When they finished, Adrian collected the containers and cleaned up without being asked, giving Ilara space to find her words. "I keep thinking about what she said," Ilara finally spoke, "about me being nothing, invisible, and I hate that part of me still believes it." Adrian settled back onto the couch, careful to maintain distance. Trauma doesn't evaporate just because the source is removed. You spent 28 years being told you were less than. That programming doesn't delete overnight. How long does it take? I don't know. Different for everyone. He was quiet for a moment. But Alara, the fact that you're questioning those beliefs, that's already progress. A month ago, you wouldn't have even recognized them as beliefs. You would have just accepted them as truth. A month ago feels like a different life. It was a different life. You're not the same person who sat in that restaurant waiting for a date she didn't want. Alara pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small out of habit. I don't know who I am if I'm not Vera's disappointing twin. That's been my entire identity for so long. Then maybe it's time to find out who else you could be. Adrian shifted slightly, his expression thoughtful. What would you do if you weren't afraid? If Vera's voice wasn't in your head telling you that you can't? The question was too big, too open. Alara's mind immediately went to safe answers. Keep working at the museum, maybe eventually make senior curator, continue living her quiet life. But underneath those reflexive responses was something else, something she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed. I wanted to paint, she said quietly. When I was young, before Vera convinced me I had no talent. I loved art not just because of what other people created, but because I wanted to create too. Wanted to put something of myself into the world instead of just cataloging other people's visions. Why did you stop? Because Vera was better. She took art classes, won competitions, got praised by teachers, and I tried once, showed a painting to my mother, and Vera laughed. Said it looked like something a child would make. Mom agreed, said I should stick to appreciating art since creating it clearly wasn't my strength. The memory still hurt, sharp and fresh. So I stopped. Decided Vera was right, that I should stay in my lane. Do you still believe that? Alara thought about it honestly. I don't know. Maybe. It's been so long since I tried that I don't even know if I could anymore. There's only one way to find out. Adrian stood, walked to the windows. I have a proposition for you, and before you say no, actually think about it. What kind of proposition? I own a property in Tuscany, a farmhouse I've been renovating for the past 2 years. It's isolated, quiet, surrounded by olive groves and vineyards. No one knows about it except Marcus and a few others I trust absolutely. He turned to face her. Take 6 months. Go there. Paint, read, garden, do whatever you want without anyone watching or judging. Figure out who Alara Voss is when she's not performing invisibility. The offer was too generous, too much. I can't just leave my job for 6 months. Why not? You have vacation time, and I've already spoken with Daniel. He agrees you need time to recover from trauma. The museum will hold your position. You spoke with my boss? Alara wasn't sure if she should be grateful or annoyed. I made a suggestion. He made his own decision. Adrian moved back toward the couch, but didn't sit. But Alara, this isn't charity. It's not me trying to fix you or control you. It's me offering you space and safety to figure out what you actually want from your life. You can say no, but at least consider it. 6 months in Italy. 6 months away from New York, and the whispers, and the constant reminders of Vera. 6 months to be alone with herself and see what emerged. It was terrifying. It was tempting. It was possibly the most selfish thing Alara had ever considered. What about Vera's trial? She asked. I'll have to testify. Not for months. The legal system moves slowly, and when the time comes, we'll fly you back. Adrian's expression softened. But you need to heal first, Alara. You can't testify effectively if you're still broken by what she did. I'm not broken. No, but you're cracked. And cracks need time and space to mend properly. The metaphor was apt enough that Alara almost smiled. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. Adrian headed toward the door, then paused. But Alara, whatever you decide about Italy, about painting, about your life, make sure it's what you actually want, not what you think you should want, not what would make you safest or smallest. What you want. He left before she could respond, and Alara sat alone in her dark apartment, turning the offer over in her mind like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. The next morning, she called Clara. You're going to think I'm insane, Alara said without preamble. Probably. What are we talking about? Alara explained the offer, the farmhouse, the 6 months, Adrian's proposition that she take time away from everything familiar to figure herself out. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, When do you leave? I haven't decided if I'm going. Elara, your evil twin just got arrested for trying to kidnap you. You're all over the tabloids. And a gorgeous, powerful man who is clearly into you is offering you a free vacation in Tuscany. What exactly are you debating? Whether it's running away? Whether I should stay and face things here instead of hiding? You've been facing things your whole life. Maybe it's time to do something else. Clara's voice gentled. Look, I love you. You're my best friend. But you've been invisible for so long that the idea of being seen terrifies you. This is a chance to be seen by yourself first, before you have to be seen by everyone else. What if I go there and find out I'm exactly as boring and worthless as Vera always said? Then you come back and we get very drunk and talk about how wrong she was. But Elara, what if you find out you're interesting? What if you discover you're creative and passionate and all the things you never let yourself be because Vera claimed them first? The possibility felt dangerous, impossible, but also for the first time in weeks it felt like hope. I'll think about it, Elara said. Think fast. Life's short, and Italy's beautiful. 2 days later, Elara stood in Daniel's office at the museum, hands clasped together to keep them from shaking. I need to request a leave of absence, she said. 6 months, for personal reasons. Daniel looked up from his desk, and his expression was knowing, sympathetic. Adrian Cade called me, explained the situation. Elara, take the time. You have sabbatical hours saved up, and frankly, after what you've been through, no one would blame you for taking a year. 6 months is already too much. 6 months is barely enough to begin processing trauma like yours. Daniel stood, moved around the desk. You're a brilliant curator, Elara, but you're also a person who's been systematically abused for most of your life. Take the time. Heal. Come back when you're ready. We'll be here. The generosity of it broke something loose in Elara's chest. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise you'll actually rest instead of spending 6 months feeling guilty about resting. Elara couldn't promise that, but she nodded anyway. The preparations happened faster than she'd expected. Adrian arranged everything with ruthless efficiency. Flights, transportation from Rome to the farmhouse, supplies, even art materials delivered to the property in advance. By the time Elara realized what was happening, she was committed, locked in, her apartment sublet to a colleague, and her life packed into 2 suitcases. Sarah threw her a goodbye dinner 2 nights before her flight. Clara came, and James from work, and a few other people Elara had kept at careful distance for years. They ate pizza and drank wine, and pretended this was a happy occasion instead of Elara fleeing the country to escape the wreckage of her life. You're coming back, right? Sarah asked as the party wound down. This isn't you disappearing forever? I'm coming back, Elara promised. I just need time to figure some things out. Take all the time you need, but Elara, send postcards or emails or something. Don't go silent on us. The request was reasonable, but it still felt like pressure. Elara agreed anyway, adding it to the growing list of expectations she'd need to manage even from across an ocean. Adrian insisted on driving her to the airport himself. They made the trip in comfortable silence, the city sliding past the windows in the gray light of early morning. When they arrived, Adrian walked her to security despite her protest that it wasn't necessary. Thank you, Elara said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. For everything. For protecting me. For believing me. For this. You don't have to thank me. Adrian's expression was unreadable. But Elara, while you're gone, be selfish. Be loud. Be visible. Be everything Vera told you that you couldn't be. Not because I'm telling you to, but because you deserve to find out who you are without her voice in your head. What if I can't? Then you'll figure that out too. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you'll surprise yourself. He pulled something from his pocket, a phone, newer than the one she carried. This is for you. It has my number, Marcus's number, and emergency contacts. If you need anything at all, you call. Understood? Elara took the phone, overwhelmed by the care embedded in the gesture. I don't know how to repay you for all of this. I'm not keeping score. Adrian's voice was soft. Just come back better than you left. That's payment enough. He didn't hug her, didn't kiss her, just nodded once and walked away. Elara watched him go, this man who'd inserted himself into her life and changed everything, and wondered what it meant that she already missed him. The flight to Rome was long and gave Alara too much time to think. She tried to read, to sleep, to watch movies on the tiny screen, but her mind kept circling back to the same questions. What was she doing? What did she hope to find? What if she got to Italy and discovered that without Vera to define herself against, she was just empty space? A driver met her at the Rome airport, professional and quiet. They drove north into Tuscany, the landscape shifting from urban to rural, highways giving way to narrow roads that wound through hills covered in vineyards and olive trees. The October light was golden, warm, nothing like New York's harsh glare. The farmhouse appeared near sunset, stone and terracotta rising from the landscape like it had grown there naturally. It was smaller than Alara had imagined, but more beautiful, weathered and solid, with gardens that had gone somewhat wild and a view that stretched for miles. The driver helped with her bags, showed her where the keys were hidden, pointed out the generator and the water heater and the other practical elements of rural Italian living. Then he was gone, and Alara was alone, truly alone for perhaps the first time in her life. The farmhouse had been furnished simply but comfortably. A bedroom with white linens and wooden furniture. A kitchen stocked with basics. A living area with overstuffed chairs and shelves full of books in multiple languages. And upstairs, in what must have once been an attic, a studio. Alara climbed the narrow stairs with her heart pounding. The studio was flooded with northern light from large windows that had been added during renovation. Canvases leaned against walls. Paints were organized by color on shelves. Brushes stood in jars like soldiers awaiting orders. Everything she would need to paint, if she could remember how. She stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, and felt something shift in her chest. Not certainty. Not sudden inspiration. Just a small, fragile possibility that maybe she could do this. The first week, Alara did nothing artistic at all. She explored the property, walked through olive groves, bought groceries in the nearby village with her terrible Italian and the help of a translation app. She read books from Adrian's shelves and cooked simple meals and went to bed when the sun set because there was nothing else to do. It was the quietest her mind had been in years. The second week, she started sketching. Nothing ambitious, just shapes and shadows, the view from the kitchen window, the gnarled olive trees. Her hand was clumsy at first, unpracticed, but muscle memory slowly returned. She filled a sketchbook, then started another. The third week, she finally approached the canvases. It took her an entire day to prepare the first one, stretching, priming, setting up her palette. And then she stood in front of the blank white surface and felt panic rise like bile. What if Vera had been right? What if she had no talent, no vision, nothing worth putting into the world? But she picked up a brush anyway, mixed colors, and made the first mark. It was terrible, muddy and uncertain, shapes that didn't quite work, colors that clashed instead of harmonized. Alara wanted to stop, to put the brushes down and walk away, and confirm that she'd been right all along to give up painting. Instead, she kept going. Day after day, she painted. Bad paintings at first, then mediocre ones, then, slowly, incrementally, pieces that held something of what she'd intended. She painted the landscape outside her windows. She painted memories, abstract representations of feeling. She painted Vera's face and then painted over it, layers of color obscuring features until only emotion remained. She painted and painted and painted, and somewhere in the repetition, in the act of creating something from nothing, Alara started to find herself. Adrian called once a week, always at the same time, always with the same question, "How are you?" At first, Alara's answers were careful, guarded. "Fine. Settling in. The house is beautiful." But as weeks turned into months, she found herself being more honest, telling him about the paintings that failed, the ones that succeeded, the strange experience of being alone without being lonely. "You sound different," Adrian said during their third-month call. "Lighter. I feel different. Still figuring out what that means." Alara was painting while they talked, the phone on speaker, her hands moving across canvas. "How are things there? With Vera?" "Trial's been postponed twice. Her lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal." Adrian's voice was neutral. "But the prosecutor isn't interested. The evidence is too strong. She's looking at significant prison time." Alara's brush paused. "How long?" 8 to 12 years most likely, with parole possible after 5. 5 years minimum before Vera could be released. 5 years where Alara wouldn't have to worry about running into her. about facing her, about being destroyed by her. The relief was immediate and followed quickly by guilt. "Is it wrong that I'm glad?" Alara asked quietly. "No, it's human. She tried to have you kidnapped, Alara. You're allowed to be relieved that there will be consequences." "Part of me still loves her, or loves who I wanted her to be. That's pathetic, isn't it?" "It's complicated. Love doesn't shut off just because someone hurts you, especially family." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "But you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. Those aren't mutually exclusive." The conversation stayed with Alara long after they hung up. She thought about Vera in a cell, probably furious, probably plotting, probably still convinced she was the victim in a story where Alara was the villain, and for the first time Alara felt something approaching pity. Vera had destroyed herself chasing something she already had: validation, worth, attention. She'd been so obsessed with winning that she'd lost everything that actually mattered. And now she'd spend years locked away, still believing the world owed her something, still unable to see that she'd been her own worst enemy. It was tragic. It was also justice. By month 4, Alara had painted enough pieces to fill the studio. Some she loved, some she hated. Most fell somewhere in the middle, but they were hers, undeniably, completely hers. Created from her vision, her emotion, her slowly awakening sense of self. She started venturing further from the farmhouse, made friends with the woman who ran the bakery in the village, joined a weekly market where local artists sold their work, though she wasn't ready to show her own paintings yet. Took Italian lessons from a retired teacher who thought Ilara's accent was hilarious but charming. And slowly, incrementally, Alara became visible. Not performing visibility the way Vera had, but genuinely present in her own life in a way she'd never managed before. Clara visited in month 5, taking a week off work to drink wine and eat pasta and see what Alara had been doing with herself. She cried when she saw the paintings, actual tears streaming down her face. "These are incredible," Clara said, standing in front of a canvas that showed abstract figures merging and separating, connection and isolation rendered in shades of blue and gold. "Alara, you have real talent, like serious talent." "They're just therapy," Alara said, embarrassed. "They're art. There's a difference." Clara turned to her, expression fierce. "You need to show these when you get back to New York. A gallery, a show, something." "I couldn't. People would what? Like them? Appreciate them? Offer you money and recognition for your work?" Clara grabbed Alara's shoulders gently. "Stop it. Stop making yourself small. These deserve to be seen." The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Alara promised to think about it, which Clara accepted as progress. After Clara left, Alara found herself actually considering the possibility. Not immediately, not a full show, but maybe submitting to a group exhibition, testing the waters, seeing if the world had space for her vision alongside all the others demanding attention. Adrian's next call came 3 days later. "I'm coming to visit," he said without preamble. "Next week, if that's okay with you?" Alara's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Why?" "Because it's been 5 months and I miss you. Is that reason enough?" It shouldn't have been. They barely knew each other, had spent more time in crisis than in normalcy. But something had shifted during their weekly calls, the conversations deepening from status updates to actual connection. Alara had told Adrian things she'd never told anyone, about her fears, her hopes, the slow process of becoming someone she didn't recognize but might actually like. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Yes, come." He arrived on a Thursday afternoon, driven by the same quiet professional who'd brought Alara from Rome. She watched from the farmhouse window as Adrian climbed out of the car, and her stomach flipped. He looked different somehow, less controlled, more relaxed. Or maybe she was just seeing him differently now that she was different herself. "The house is beautiful," Adrian said when she opened the door. Pictures didn't do it justice. Pictures don't capture the smell of olive trees or the way the light changes in the evening. Alara stepped aside to let him in, suddenly nervous. "How long are you staying?" "A week, if you'll have me. I brought work, so I won't be underfoot. Just wanted to see how you were doing, in person." They fell into an easy rhythm over the next few days. Adrian worked in the mornings while Alara painted. They explored the countryside together in the afternoons, driving to nearby villages and sampling wine and eating at small trattorias where no one knew who they were or cared. In the evenings, they talked, long, meandering conversations about everything and nothing. On the fourth night, over dinner on the farmhouse terrace under a sky full of stars, Adrian finally asked the question Alara had been avoiding. "Are you coming back?" he said. "To New York? To your life there?" "I don't know," Alara admitted. "I still have another month here. And the trial? I'll need to come back for that. But after—" She trailed off, uncertain. "After you have choices. That's what this was for, to give you options instead of just defaulting to what's familiar. What if I want to stay here? Keep painting? Build a life that's quiet and simple and mine?" "Then you should." Adrian's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "But Alara, can I be honest with you about something?" "Always." "I think part of you wants to stay here because it's safe. Because going back means facing people's judgments and Vera's trial and all the messy reality you've been avoiding. And that's understandable. But it's also another version of hiding." The words stung because they were true. Alara had been thinking about staying in Italy not just because she loved it, but because going back to New York meant being visible in ways that still terrified her. "I don't know how to be visible without being vulnerable," she said quietly. "You don't. That's the cost of being seen. People can actually see you, the good and the bad. But Alara, you've spent 5 months becoming someone worth seeing. Don't waste that by hiding somewhere beautiful instead of somewhere familiar. What if I go back and nothing's changed? What if I'm still the same scared person I was before?" "You're not. I can see it. The way you hold yourself, the way you speak, the way you exist in space. You take up room now. Not aggressively, but unapologetically. That's not nothing." Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the changes she felt were real, permanent, visible to others, and not just self-delusion. "Come back," Adrian said, and there was something in his voice that made Alara look up sharply. "Not for me. Not for your job or your friends or anyone else. Come back because you deserve to live your life in the open instead of in exile. Come back and show your paintings. Let people see what you've created. Let yourself be proud of what you've become. And if I fail, if people hate the work or think I'm ridiculous for trying, then you'll survive it. Just like you survived Vera. Just like you survived every other thing that tried to make you small." Adrian reached across the table, and Alara met him halfway, their hands connecting in the space between them. "But I don't think you'll fail. I think you're going to surprise a lot of people, including yourself." The touch was electric, charged with months of phone calls and carefully maintained distance, and something neither of them had been willing to name. Alara looked at their joined hands and felt something click into place. Not certainty, not happily ever after, but possibility. The chance that maybe she could have this too. Connection. Partnership. Someone who saw her and chose her anyway. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good. That means it matters." Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. "But Alara, you've been scared your whole life. Maybe it's time to be scared and do it anyway." She returned to New York in early March, 6 months after she'd left. The city was still gray and loud and overwhelming, but Alara found she'd missed it. The energy, the density, the feeling of being part of something larger than herself. Adrian met her at the airport, and the hug they shared was neither tentative nor awkward. Just two people who'd found something unexpected in each other and were willing to see where it went. "Welcome home," he said against her hair. "Is it still home?" Alara asked. "I feel different, like I don't quite fit anymore." "Then we'll make it fit. Together." The trial was scheduled for 2 weeks after her return. Alara spent the intervening time settling back into her apartment, reconnecting with friends, and preparing herself to face Vera in court. The prosecutor had coached her on what to expect. Vera's lawyers would try to make Alara seem unstable, vindictive, a scorned sister exaggerating normal sibling conflict into criminal behavior. "Just tell the truth," the prosecutor advised. "Let the evidence speak for itself." The courtroom was smaller than Alara had imagined from TV shows. More cramped, more ordinary. She sat in the witness area and tried not to look at Vera, who sat at the defense table in clothes chosen to make her look sympathetic and small. When Alara was finally called to testify, her hands shook. But her voice was steady as she recounted the history, the years of cruelty, the escalation, the night at Luminaire, the break-in, the recorded confession. She didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just stated facts in chronological order. Vera's lawyer tried to rattle her during cross-examination, suggesting Alara had exaggerated, had misremembered, had perhaps even orchestrated events to frame her sister. But Alara held firm, repeating the same truth she'd told on direct examination. "Isn't it true," the lawyer said, "that you've always been jealous of your sister? That this is really about wanting what she has?" Alara looked at Vera then, really looked at her for the first time since entering the courtroom. Her sister's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held the same calculation they always had, assessing, measuring, looking for weaknesses to exploit. "No," Alara said clearly. "I'm not jealous of Vera. I feel sorry for her." The lawyer blinked. "Sorry for her?" "Yes. Because she's spent her entire life competing against someone who was never her enemy. Because she destroyed herself chasing validation that would never be enough. Because she had everything, looks, talent, charisma, and she wasted it being cruel." Alara's voice remained steady. "I don't want what Vera has. I want what she could have had if she'd chosen differently, and that makes me sad, not jealous." The lawyer had no follow-up. The judge called a recess, and when proceedings resumed, the defense seemed deflated, their strategy of painting Alara as a vindictive sibling thoroughly undermined by her obvious compassion. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. Alara didn't attend the sentencing hearing. She asked the prosecutor to inform her of the outcome, but she couldn't bring herself to sit in that courtroom again and watch Vera receive her punishment. It felt too much like victory, and this didn't feel like winning, just necessary consequences. 10 years. Vera received 10 years with possibility of parole after 6. The prosecutor called Alara personally to deliver the news. "It's over," he said. "You can move forward with your life now." Could she? Alara wasn't sure, but she was willing to try. The gallery show came together faster than Alara had anticipated. Clara had connected her with a curator who specialized in emerging artists, and somehow Alara's paintings from Italy had resonated. Not a solo show, she wasn't ready for that, but inclusion in a group exhibition of artists exploring themes of identity and transformation. Opening night arrived with spring rain, and Alara's nerves stretched to breaking. She'd almost backed out 17 times, convinced that showing her work was too vulnerable, too exposed, too much. But Adrian had talked her down each time, reminding her that visibility was the point. The gallery was crowded when they arrived. Alara recognized some faces: Clara, Sarah, Daniel from the museum, James. But most were strangers, people who'd come to see art with no idea whose work they were viewing. Alara's paintings hung in the back corner of the gallery. 4 pieces she'd chosen carefully. The abstract figures in blue and gold, a landscape that was more emotion than geography, a self-portrait that showed her face half in shadow, and the painting she'd done of Vera's features obscured by layers of color. She stood near them, trying to look casual, and watched people's reactions. Some passed by with barely a glance. Others stopped, studied, moved closer to examine brushwork and color choices. A few pulled out phones to photograph the information placards. An older woman spent 10 minutes in front of the self-portrait, then turned to Alara. "Are you the artist?" she asked. Alara's first instinct was to deny it, to deflect, but she forced herself to nod. "Yes." "It's extraordinary. The way you've captured being both seen and unseen simultaneously. I can feel the tension in every brushstroke." The woman smiled. "You have a real gift for emotional honesty. Don't lose that." She moved on before Alara could respond, leaving her standing there with something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the simple satisfaction of being seen and not destroyed by the exposure. Adrian found her an hour later, still standing near her paintings like a nervous parent at a school play. 3 of them sold, he said quietly. The gallery owner told me. 2 to collectors, 1 to a museum in Boston. What? Alara turned to him, certain she'd misheard. That's not... I didn't expect... You should expect it. They're good, Alara. People can see that. Adrian's expression was proud, genuine. This is what happens when you stop hiding. The world gets to benefit from what you create. Alara looked around the gallery, at the people examining art, the conversations happening in clusters, the casual democracy of strangers making their own judgments about what mattered. And somewhere in that crowd, people were looking at her work, connecting with it, seeing something of themselves in what she'd created. It wasn't validation. It wasn't proof that Vera had been wrong, or that Alara had been right. It was just existence, putting something into the world and letting the world respond however it chose. "Thank you," Alara said to Adrian, "for pushing me, for not letting me hide. You did the hard part. I just held the door open." He paused, then added quietly, "Can I tell you something?" "Always. I'm in love with you. Have been since probably the second or third week you were in Italy. Maybe before that. But I wanted you to know." The confession should have been terrifying. 6 months ago, it would have been. But standing in a gallery with her art on the walls and strangers appreciating what she'd created, Alara found she wasn't afraid. "I love you too," she said, testing the words. They fit. "I don't know what that looks like going forward. I'm still figuring out who I am, but I know I want you there while I figure it out." Adrian's smile was worth every risk she'd taken. "I can work with that." They left the gallery together as rain turned the streets to mirrors reflecting city lights. Tomorrow, Alara would return to the museum and her job and the ordinary demands of life. But tonight, she walked through Manhattan holding the hand of a man who'd helped save her, with art sales in her pocket and the beginnings of confidence in her chest. Vera was in prison. Alara was free. And for the first time in 28 years, that felt like exactly the right outcome. 2 years later, Alara stood in the Tuscan farmhouse that had become her second home. She and Adrian had made it official 6 months after the gallery show. Not marriage, they'd both agreed they weren't quite ready for that, but partnership. A commitment to building something together that honored both their complicated histories and their tentative hopes for the future. Adrian had gradually extracted himself from the darker aspects of his business, transitioning legitimate operations to managers he trusted and divesting from anything that required moral compromise. It had been neither fast nor easy, but he'd done it with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else. Alara had continued painting. Her work had been featured in 2 more group shows and 1 small solo exhibition. Critics called her style emotionally raw and unflinchingly honest. She'd started teaching workshops for other women recovering from abuse, using art as therapy and self-discovery. The work fulfilled her in ways curating never had. And now, standing in the farmhouse studio with afternoon light streaming through the windows, Alara was working on her most ambitious piece yet, a large canvas depicting 2 figures that might be sisters or might be different versions of the same person, reaching toward each other across a space that could be connection or separation depending on how you looked at it. Her phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello?" "Alara." The voice was familiar and foreign at once. "It's Vera." Alara's hand tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "I'm allowed phone privileges. I called Clara. She gave it to me." Vera paused. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from." "You are." Alara moved to the window, needing to ground herself in the landscape. "What do you want?" "To apologize. I know it's not enough. I know it can't undo what I did. But I've been in therapy here, and I'm starting to understand—" Vera's voice cracked slightly. "I'm starting to understand how sick I was, how much I hurt you, and I wanted to say I'm sorry." The apology landed like a stone. Alara examined it, turning it over in her mind, looking for manipulation or angles. But Vera's voice sounded different, smaller, less certain, almost genuine. "Okay," Alara said carefully. "I hear you. That's it? That's all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say, Vera? That I forgive you? That we can be sisters now?" Alara's voice was gentle but firm. "I can't give you that. Maybe someday, but not now. You hurt me too much for too long." "I know, I just—" Vera took a shaky breath. "I needed you to know that I see it now. What I did. What I was. And I'm trying to be different. Not for you. For me. Because I can't live with being that person anymore." "Then I hope you succeed," Alara said, and meant it. "I hope you find whatever peace you're looking for. But Vera, I can't be part of that process. I need my distance to stay healthy." I understand. There was a long pause. I saw the article about your art show in the prison library. Someone had left a magazine. Your painting was featured. It was beautiful. The compliment hurt in a way Alara hadn't expected. Thank you. I always knew you had talent. I was just too threatened by it to admit it. Vera's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I'm sorry, Alara, for everything. For being the sister you deserved to have but never got. I'm sorry too, Alara said, that you felt like you had to destroy me to feel good about yourself. That's a terrible way to live. They talked for a few more minutes, carefully, painfully, like strangers trying to find common ground. When they finally hung up, Alara stood holding the phone and feeling a complex mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. She called Adrian immediately. Vera called, she said when he answered. From prison. To apologize. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Sad, maybe? And relieved, and scared that I might actually want to forgive her eventually. Alara moved back to her canvas, studying the reaching figures. Is that naive? To think people can actually change? Some people can. Others just get better at hiding who they really are. Adrian was quiet for a moment. But Alara, whether Vera changes or not, that's not your responsibility. You get to decide what role, if any, you want her to have in your life, and whatever you choose, I'll support it. Even if I choose forgiveness? Even then, though I'd want to be there for any in-person contact, just in case. The protective instinct made Alara smile. I don't think I'm ready for in-person contact, maybe ever. But I'm glad she's trying, for her sake. She returned to her painting after they hung up, and found herself adjusting the space between the reaching figures, making it slightly wider, adding more light to the gap. Not separation, not connection, just the possibility of both. That evening, Alara walked through the olive groves as the sun set, painting the landscape in gold and amber. She thought about Vera in her cell, working through decades of damage in therapy sessions and lonely hours. She thought about Adrian in New York, managing the legitimate empire he'd built from the ashes of his former life. She thought about her own journey from the girl in the restaurant to the woman she was becoming. None of it was perfect, none of it was complete, but it was real, and it was hers, and that was enough. Back at the farmhouse, Alara made dinner and ate alone on the terrace, watching stars emerge in the deepening sky. Tomorrow she'd return to New York and Adrian and the life they were building together. But tonight she sat with herself. The self she'd discovered in paint and solitude and hard-won independence, and felt something she'd never expected to feel. Contentment. Not happiness, which was too fragile and dependent on circumstances, but contentment. The quiet satisfaction of having survived, having grown, having become someone worth knowing. Her phone buzzed with the text from Clara. Saw Vera called you. You okay? Alara typed back. Yes. Surprisingly, genuinely yes. She was okay. More than okay. She was visible and vulnerable and still standing, still pack-creating, still loving and being loved, still learning who she was separate from the sister who'd tried to define her. Vera had spent 28 years trying to make Alara invisible, but in the end, all that cruelty had accomplished was showing Alara exactly who she didn't want to be. And in the space left by that negative definition, Alara had found room to become herself. Not the good twin or the bad twin, not the strong one or the weak one, just Alara, flawed and frightened and brave enough to keep trying anyway. And that, finally, was enough. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human drama. The olive trees rustled in the evening breeze. And in a farmhouse in Tuscany, a woman who'd once wished to disappear sat alone in the dark, finally, completely seen, by others, yes, but more importantly by herself. And she didn't look away.